Welcome
Welcome to the
to the
Empress and
Empress
the
and the
Fool.
Fool.
I'm Sarah Ditmore.
And I'm Kaitlyn Gulock. And we're here to discuss all things magical and mystic from the perspective of two curious witches.
Woohoo! This is our bi-weekly Tarot Time episode where we review our favorite decks and discuss the ethics and methodology of reading tarot for yourself and others.
Mhm.
Yay!
Yay! Um, man, I'm so excited.
Yeah.
Uh, yeah, I feel like I think this is, besides the Rider Waite Smith tarot kind of one, that really had to do with like a deck, but this is our first episode where we're going to talk about stuff like around tarot cards.
Yeah.
And about them. And I know that like in the future we have some cool episodes planned about like reversal readings and different spreads and things. But like I'm excited. I feel like this is the first official one of like not a deck review we're actually talking about.
Yeah, so I know I'm excited. We've been because the first one we talked about the Rider-Waite Smith, and then we did each of our favorite Oracle decks, and so now we're going to be talking more generally. And so our kind of plan for these Tarot Time episodes is to float between both and do, deck reviews of our favorite decks, alternated with episodes where we talk more generally about like reading the tarot, taking care of your tarot decks, like the anatomy of the tarot, and just other concepts around like tarot and Oracle reading. And so today we're going to be talking all about how we take care of our tarot decks. But before that, how are you? What's happening in your life?
I am good. I'm in the middle of midterms. So
Oh
that's
my God.
been
Every time you talk
lovely.
about student things, I just think like, oh, as much as I love learning, I'm glad I'm not a student anymore.
I I do love learning. I don't do so well. I mean, I'm saying that. No, I get like decent grades, but like I don't do well in this like environment as much. Like when I was
Mhm.
not in school, I have this giant document called Field Notes, and I don't know how many, I'm like almost embarrassed to tell you how many pages it is, and I'm not gonna look it up. And it's just all the things that like I hear while I'm at my job, and I'm like, I've never heard of that before. Like, let me do all the deep diving that I can do and find out everything about
Let
this.
me
Like,
hyper fixate on this new thing now.
yeah, and then obsessing over formatting the document and making it nice. And then as soon as I have to learn it for school, it's like, fuck this.
Yeah, that's like I have a page on Notion that is just called Things to Learn, and it's just a list of all the things I think someday would be fun to learn. And it ranges from like how to weave my own basket to like
Very on brand.
astrology to like cheese making to like anything that I've just like ever heard about that I'm like maybe I could do that.
And you can.
And I can, and that's what I love about being an adult who's learning rather than a student who's learning. Is like I took a drawing class over the weekend, so much fun, and just zero pressure.
I love that. I'm so glad you're doing you told me about that on our like meeting call before, and I was
Oh,
just delighted to hear that. It's like it's I feel like I've taken a drawing class before, but I felt like a lot of pressure to like be
mhm.
really good about it. But then when you kind of like just let that go, you're like, oh, this fucks. This is really good.
It's really fun. And then of
This is
course
really
the like
fun.
neurodivergent in me has now spent about $100 on drawing materials and I'm like I'm gonna draw all the time.
Oh
We'll
yeah.
see how long that lasts.
I mean, look, I have a little like self-made studio downstairs, and the problem was that in Baltimore, I lived really close to the art um it was like an art university program that's actually pretty famous. That if you've watched Broad City, it's where Abby went.
Okay, I don't know pop culture things, but I believe you.
Abby has like a sweatshirt from this place. So it's like a famous like arts institute, and they had a student art shop there.
Oh wow.
So everything was like pretty
Oh.
reasonably priced.
And
And there
also the
was like,
variety. Like in the mountain town I live in, I go to the like office supply store for art supplies and there's
mm,
like two shelves and that's it. And it's
yeah.
like everything from like watercolors to acrylic to
Mm.
charcoal to, pens and it's like you got two shelves of every art supply.
I should I should have been more boxed in by that, but I got stamp carving
Yeah,
materials.
of
I got
course.
like freaking, yeah, I got way super into acrylic painting, which also is another surprise for you down the line as well.
I just made
But very
a
down the line.
watercolor painting for my friend Chelsea's birthday,
Oh,
and I'm not gonna tell you how many times I tried to do the same thing until I finally was happy enough with it to be like, good, I can send this to someone.
I understand that. But yeah, I think like whatever you've put time and effort into, that's going to be like
Yeah.
perfect. But I know for your own brain, you're like,
Yeah. No, no, it's been really fun. I've been really enjoying it. I mean, this has not been my first tiptoe into the drawing world. Like I've always loved, I've had a sketchbook since I was a kid, but it's fun. I've
mm-hmm,
always felt like my biggest thing with art is that I enjoy it, but I don't have any technique. I just make it up. And so I was like, I've always wanted to take a class where I could just learn like what are the actual skills to use to make something look like
mm-hmm.
something else. And so getting in there and like just even just 2 days of learning like, the technique of how to draw the lines and how to use light and shadow and like how to draw. It's the first time I've taken a drawing class since I was 16. And I was like, oh, I forgot how much fun this is.
I'm so happy for you. That's very fool of you because I do the same thing. I'm
Oh, I
like,
did embrace my fool.
you did. It's very like I did the same thing where it's like I don't know anything about stamp carving. I don't know anything about acrylic painting. I don't know anything about a lot of things, but I'm just gonna do it
Yeah.
and try to figure it out. And like I think that's a really beautiful part of the artistic process is just
Yeah.
like having you're like, okay, I have a way that I really want this to look, and I'm going to figure it out. And that's like why so many artists have imposter syndrome because we're like, I'm gonna figure out my way to get there. And it feels like kind of shitty sometimes where you're like, I don't know the proper way to
Yeah.
do this,
Yeah.
but you just do it, and that is the proper way. So
Yeah, and
I'm
I
proud
think
of
having
you.
that like blend, right, of like just doing it and then like also being like, okay, I want to be a little better than I am, and there are people who can teach me things that will help me get
Yeah.
there. Like this is a skill I can learn. Like
Yes.
so like I
Yes.
don't need to reinvent the wheel. I don't need to figure this out. I don't need to like I'm thinking of the Vitruvian Man, Leonardo da Vinci, of like I don't need to
Yes.
sit and like study like for the first time how the human form works. Someone can teach me how to look at it. Someone can teach me
Yes.
how to look at an orange and like get the curvature correct and like
Yes.
yeah.
Perspective and shadows.
Yeah.
Yeah. Backs of giants, you get to like benefit from everybody else's trials and errors. I mean, we've mentioned this even in a different podcast, but um those medieval cats and dogs back then were a little atrocious. And then somebody was like, hey, what if we didn't
Yeah, what
do
if we
that?
actually made them look like how they look?
Yeah. And what
What
if
if
things
every
didn't?
animal we drew didn't have a human face?
Yeah, like what if everything just wasn't 2D and like everything looked like it was right here, like the
Yeah.
mountains here, trees here, the
Yeah.
sky right here, you
It is
know?
wild to me, like we think of invention a lot with tech, but it's
Hmm.
always wild to me the way that happened with art too. That like, okay,
Yeah.
this is such a nerd pull, but Charlie and I are rewatching the last Avatar: The Last Airbender series.
Oh, I do that all the time.
And he
Yes.
was complete, which by the way, I think should be like assigned watching for all like
Hmm.
magical people because there's so much good content around like how the spirit
Oh,
world works and like
oh,
how energy works and like communing with the elements. And it's just like so
and
good.
respecting and seeing how everything is like the
Yes.
same.
The harmony. I know the like
Uh-huh.
oneness. We just had like the swamp episode where they're talking about how it's
That's
all
the
like
last
one.
that's the last one I watched.
Oh my God, incredible.
I watched it last week.
Oh, we watched it last night.
I
But
because I
Charlie was
oh
saying
go for it.
he was complaining that in Korra, the like next series that was
Hmm.
created, they like in Avatar: The Last Airbender, there's like lightning wielding, and lightning wielding is like a very rare skill that only like the best of the best firebenders know how to do. And
Yep.
then in Legend of Korra, it's just like part of society and it's just like normal. And he's like, how did that like that makes no sense. It's supposed to be really rare and hard to do. And I was like, but if you think about it, that's how society develops. Like a skill is like someone figures it out and it's like really unique and really rare and they're like really special. And
Yeah.
then it becomes like incorporated into how we all function as a society. And so like the art, it's like no one figured out like perspective and size and like
Hmm.
depth and like creating three-dimensional images on two-dimensional mediums. And then someone did, and
Yeah.
it was like they were super special and unique. And now like second graders are learning how to draw a cube.
Right. Yeah. Like that's one of the mental tests that we do for like
Yeah.
patients. It's
And
like
that's like how
recreate.
humanities evolves.
It is really cool. I mean, there's a lot of things that I have to say about Cora as well.
But we are not
But
creating
we're
a
not an
maybe we
Avatar
should have
podcast.
like a offshoot podcast someday where we rewatch and discuss all when the how about okay, when the new Avatar show comes out, because there's a new one
Oh
coming out, we can
my
go
God.
back and watch Avatar: The Last Airbender and watch every episode and talk about it together.
I'm so into it and I love Avatar so much. I am so excited for the new series. I'm like pissing myself excited. I
I'm
am
like
just
I'm that right in the middle of excited and nervous. I hope it's great and I will watch it, but it could be shit.
I will not hold yeah, you know what? I'm just excited that we keep on like we keep on making it alive. Like
Yeah.
we're continuing to keep it alive and
And
that
the
like
original creator of Avatar is involved with this one,
yes.
which makes me hopeful that it'll work out.
Yeah, the original creators of the Avatar: The Last Airbender show were a part of the live action series, but then they either got fired or like
No,
left or
I think
something.
they dipped. I think they were like,
Oh, they
I
dipped?
think they had an argument. I
That's what
don't
it
quote me
was.
on this, but I think it was like they weren't happy with the way it was coming together. The
Yeah.
show creators were like too bad, and or like
Yeah.
whoever was in charge, and so they kind of like pulled apart from it.
They shot themselves. They did a lot of things really well, but some of the things I was like,
I
what
never
in the
watched the live
world
action
are
because I've
you
heard such crap about
doing?
it. Yeah.
Well, there's the live action movie and then there's the live action series. The movie, we don't talk about her.
Yeah, that's what I thought we were talking about. What's the
Oh
live
no,
action?
the live action series that Netflix released
Oh
like
my
a
God, I
couple
don't
years
even
ago.
think I know. I think I remember talk about this, but I don't think I have ever seen it.
Okay, so welcome to our Avatar podcast now. We're
Yeah,
like
okay,
totally.
so we should
Oh
spin.
wait,
We can come back to this.
I do have one question before.
Oh yeah, I have
I
seen
have one
images
question
about
and one
this.
thing. Yeah, the one thing that they got incredibly right was the actor for Sokka is like he is a real life
Yeah,
Sokka
he
and it
is the
makes me
embodiment
really
of Sokka.
yeah.
Incredible.
Yeah. Okay, so I have two things to say. One, listeners, we've never assigned homework. I never intend to assign a lot of homework, but this one's really important and I will not budge. Watch Avatar: The Last Airbender. It's on Netflix. I
Yeah.
actually have a separate subscription to Netflix so that I can comfort watch it.
The episodes
Uh,
are only like 20 minutes too, so it's like
I
super quick. And
know.
it's that great like kid show energy where everything's resolved in every episode and people just
Yep.
like there's so it's so good. It's so
It's
good.
it's a perfect
Ooh,
show.
the other one you should watch if you're looking for like magical kids shows that are actually very tapped into the reality of like how spirits work and all of that is Hilda.
Oh my God, yes.
Yeah, my mentor,
Yes.
Kaitlyn Grania, is the one who tuned me into Hilda, and it's so good.
It's so sweet. I thought you were gonna say Over the Garden Wall because
Mm.
that's another like
Over the Garden Wall is more of like exploring like liminal spaces and like
yes.
I don't want to give anything away, but like and that's all of the shows to get all the episodes together add up to like an hour and a half, so you can just watch it as a movie.
Wow, I didn't even
Yeah.
think about that.
Charlie and
Yeah,
I do it for the fall equinox every year. We watch Over the Garden Wall.
maybe okay, maybe we could do like a remote like fun watching together. Yeah, maybe
Yeah.
we'll make like a document of like our musts or
Yeah.
something, like
Yeah.
must watch. Sorry, before we actually get into the episode, because we're almost about to hit 15 minutes. Sorry.
And we're just like,
I'm really not sorry.
life.
I'm not that sorry at all. I actually know the answer to this, but for our listeners, Sarah,
Yes.
what kind of bender are you?
Oh, yeah. I mean, so here's the thing. I always struggle with this one, actually,
Same.
because I think I'm in a waterbender because, like, I've got that
Mm-hmm.
healing, like, nurturing energy. I'm a
Uh-huh.
Pisces. Like, I'm big on, like, it's definitely the element I work with the most. I'm very, like, fluid. But in the show, I very deeply resonate with Aang because of his just like childlike joy and like a willingness to like see good in everything. And so
Hmm.
like I definitely associate with Aang as a character, but I think I'm more of a waterbender than an airbender.
I agree.
Yeah.
Yeah. I actually have the same thing where I'm like, oh, I was between my whole life. I was like, I don't know if I'm an air or a waterbender because I'm a very like Healy Carey person. So waterbender, but I'm also just kind of like a like
Yeah.
kind of creative out like not super tethered person like
Yeah.
air. But I have discovered in my adulthood I'm actually a firebender, I think.
I could see that. I mean, Pisces and Aries also makes sense.
Yeah,
Like,
I know. But yeah, I was like and I think that's the other cool thing about when we talk about magic things and when we like
hmm.
look at Avatar as well is that like you can have two things exist at the same time. You can have firebenders that are super destructive, but you can also have
Yeah.
firebenders who are super passionate and like creative and
And
very
also
like
like Iroh exists and
excited.
he's super nurturing and just uses like makes tea and then he's
Yeah.
also a badass.
The best character
I mean,
ever.
that's like same with waterbending, right? Like
Yeah.
Katara's like she has healing powers, like there's a
Hmm.
lot of like really nurturing, like motherly energy about her, but then also like you piss her off and she's gonna freeze your hand off.
Or the really scary episode that we will not spoil for anybody,
Yeah.
like the scariest Avatar episode.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway,
Okay.
okay.
Anyway, so about tarot.
What are
Now
we
that
talking?
we've moved into also one more sidetrack and then we'll talk about tarot. Hey, we told people what they were getting into. We said we're two neurodivergent best friends. We're gonna ramble sometimes.
Every episode, all the time. Okay, I'm not mad about it.
But this is this little like local shop here called Atelier that's all like it's mostly a yarn store, but they have a bunch of little art supplies too. And I
Cute.
went in there to get some art supplies, and I need you to know that they sell the best chocolate in the world that you may or not may not remember.
I have seen that one before.
So
I
Cocoa
love,
is a brand of chocolate that I would learned about through the farmers market in Edinburgh, the Castle Terrace Farmers Market. It
yeah.
is a local Edinburgh brand that like makes, or I mean Scotland brand that like makes homemade chocolate with really like unique flavors. They have a haggis spice
I was about to say, is that the one
one,
with the
yeah.
haggis? Yeah.
And so we would always go there. Kaitlyn and I would always go there on Sunday mornings. This was the one outside of our house, not the grass market
Hmm.
one. And we would go every morning, every Sunday morning, and like I'd always try their new weird flavor of chocolate. And then this art store is the only other place I've ever found that sells cocoa chocolate. And it's
Oh,
so good and it makes me so happy.
is that your happy thing for this week?
Oh yeah, I forgot we were gonna do that. Caitlin and I decided we were
I
gonna start
forgot until I
doing
said it.
like one thing about the week that felt magical or made us happy.
Mhm.
Um,
Yeah.
um, no, my happy thing is this Lego that Charlie and I made. And that's cherry
Shut
blossoms.
up.
It was a
I,
gift from Charlie's brother for my birthday. And we had a little date night where
oh,
we watched Avatar and made a little cherry blossom Lego. And so that's my happy thing from the week.
do you know I have currently like holding up my pride flag behind me is a cherry blossom bonsai
Oh,
Lego set,
oh,
which is really cute. I cannot believe that one is gorgeous though. I love
yeah.
that.
What's your happy thing or magical thing?
I have two little things. One literally just today, my sweet little puppy Angel, who's just over 4 months, learned
Hmm.
how to go downstairs.
Oh, oh.
I know.
Do you have any cute videos of her trying and failing?
No, because I can't look at her when she's doing it. She gets nervous. So when I'm looking at
Oh,
her, she's like, Mom, pick me up. And then I'm like,
oh,
so I have to sit outside. We have like,
stop.
I know our yard has like literally like four little stairs to go down. so she can get outside. She can go outside and do stairs out the front door, but the
Oh
back
my
door
God.
stairs, like,
They scare
absolutely,
her.
they scare her.
Oh.
So I have to sit outside, and if I'm there, she'll be like, "Mom's gonna take me down the stairs." So I have to like sit outside and wait for her to come down. And so she did it like twice today.
Oh, stop.
So
That's
we're
so
proud of her.
cute.
I know. So
Okay.
that's one.
Amazing.
I'll get a video when I can. And then my second one is I freaking love this thing. I got it for myself because
Is
I have
that
anxiety.
Lush? That looks like
Yes,
Lush. Yeah.
it's Lush. I have anxiety and I need to take care of my cuticles. And this is their like lemony flutter
Ooh, nice.
cuticle butter. Oh my God, I didn't realize that rhymed. It smells like a lemon bar.
Oh, damn. Do
And
I
it's
need to make lemon bars after this call? I might need to make
yes,
lemon
and
bars after this
send
call.
them to me because that's my fucking
Yes.
favorite.
I love lemon bars. I have like a huge basket of lemons for my grandma too, so.
Actually, Sarah and I are planning for her to come over here to Denver for my
I
birthday.
literally just forgot that we were recording a podcast. I was like, who are you talking to? Why are you using my name in the third person? And I was like, right, because we have an audience.
Yeah, because we're actually doing this for other people. But I'm gonna make an official request to Sarah that she makes lemon bars for me for my
Yes,
birthday.
I will absolutely make. I literally, before you even said that, I had the thought of like, oh, I'll bring lemon bars with me when I visit.
Yeah, that's what I want.
Good,
All
good.
right, should we actually do
Yes,
this
okay.
episode
Let's
while I'm
talk
putting
tarot.
cuticle butter on?
So
Yes.
our topic today is deck care. So you have a new deck. What do you do with it? You have an old deck. How do you take care of it? You want to get rid of a deck? How do you get rid of it? So we're going to talk all
Yeah.
about the care and tending of your tarot decks. And I say tarot, but any deck, like oracle
Mhm.
decks, any card deck you use for magical purposes.
Yeah. And I'm going to do my best to be an adult that is mature and not laugh every time we say deck care. Take care of your decks.
Yeah, okay. Anyway, so
Actually, one of the what is it called? Like not the title, but like the subheading of our podcast. Like we have a very short document of things that we tossed around. And one of the
Oh,
ones
like
that I put was
ideas that we
yeah,
came up with. Yeah, so we were brainstorming, do we need like a subtitle for our, it's Empress and the Fool with a subtitle. We never actually did a subtitle, but what was the
no,
one that I still
my
liked Two Broke Witches.
Two Broke Witches is good. My favorite one is Show Me Your Decks.
Big deck
Big
energy.
deck energy. Wow, the merch ideas are just flowing.
Yes,
Big deck
yes.
energy
Add it
is
to the
very good.
sheet, add it to the
Okay, yeah.
doc.
All right,
Okay, so
let's
Kaylin,
do
what
it.
do you do when you get a new deck? Uh,
Um,
yeah.
lately, buying decks has been a little bit weird because I don't super like want to use them until we get to review them on the podcast. But I'm thinking of just changing my tune on that and just diving right in. Um, yeah, I don't know. I think getting a deck, I just want to like get to know its like anatomy a little bit first, like how it opens and closes. Like, does it have a booklet? What do I need to like
Hmm.
keep stock of? And what do I need to like be mindful? Does it have a ribbon in it? Does it open easily? Can the cards
Hmm.
easily fall out? Like stuff like that. Yeah, what's all in here? And then yeah, and then like I love just trying to like go through all the cards and look at all the images and see which ones like stand out to me, what kind of because you only get like a little bit of a snapshot of what the imagery is like.
Yeah.
So you have to make kind of a gut decision on like, do I like this art? Does this resonate with me? But then you get to actually see the entire deck and like look at every
Yeah.
card and like meditate on it and see how you feel and like
Yeah.
see what kind of like energy you get from it. Is it like joyful? Is it kind of like spooky? Is it friendly? Um,
Yeah.
is it hard to get to know? Is it easy to get to know? So I think it's just a lot about like the kind of like first date first date
Yeah,
phase of
totally.
the tarot deck. Yeah.
Yeah,
How about
ditto.
yourself?
I think when I first get a tarot deck or an oracle deck, the first thing I do is just sit down and like you look through all the cards.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't do it in any sort of like super intentional way. Like I'm not writing notes or like
Hmm.
meditating or at my altar, I just like sit down at my kitchen table or on my couch and like flip through
Hmm.
the cards just to see them. Um, and then like when I'm actually trying to start working with a new deck, then I have more intentional practices. Like one of the things I like to
Yeah.
do because decks always come in order. So if it's the tarot, they'll be
Hmm.
ordered by suit, and if it's an oracle deck, it'll usually be like alphabetical or numerical.
Right.
So I like to do like I like to spread all the cards out on the table and then just like move them around because not only does it shuffle the cards really well because you're like totally mixing them up so no two cards that were together are still together, but also I'm touching them all. So it's like getting my energy mixed in with the cards.
Oh.
So that's one of my favorites is just like touching every card and like moving them all around so that they're because if you just do the normal shuffle that we do for like shuffling cards,
Hmm.
big chunks are staying together and so they'll
Right.
still be more or less in order. So if I spread them out on the table, it like properly shuffles them and gets like kind of a little bit of connection going on between me and the
Oh,
cards.
I like that.
So
That
that's one
feels
of my
like
favorites,
very,
yeah.
that feels very anti-neurodivergent of you. Like, mush them all around. You're like,
Well,
Sarah,
this is
what?
after I very orderly look through each card and
Yeah, I think I actually like that is one of the things that I actually don't think that we put on our note sheet. But yeah, one of the things that's like really weirdly hard to do is to shuffle them properly and
hmm
to feel like you're
hmm
getting true randomness. Um, I think my method is like doing sorry, I shouldn't do that hand motion on video. Shuffling with your hands in a stack, but then also like cutting the deck a bunch of
Yeah,
times.
yeah, like
And
just doing,
people
yeah.
yeah, doing that and then like splitting them, and people hate how I cut decks for like playing cards because I'll always do them like incredibly unevenly, and like you asked me to cut the deck, I'll do like three cards
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
and move them. But like trying to like it's kind of hard to figure out when you do have true randomness,
Yeah.
and that kind of feels like another little like kind of achievement of getting to know your cards. Like it's kind of like unlocking
Yeah. It's like,
a
okay, they're
level.
not like all the A's aren't together anymore. I got an A and an
Yeah.
S, you know?
And another AS. Sorry.
I also think
um,
that like taking that time to kind of look at all the cards is a really great way to start to figure out like how much do I need to sit with these cards? Because there are some cards that
yeah.
I get where it's like, I feel like there are some decks I've gotten where most decks I've gotten where I've never even looked at the booklet. Like, I
Mm.
like look at the cards, I get a sense for what the cards are about, and I'm good. And then there's
Mm.
some decks where I get, and I'm like, the fuck is happening here?
Who
And
are
I need to
you?
go like study the booklet and
Hmm.
really understand like how this deck works and understand how these cards operate so that I can like use them in readings
Hmm.
without feeling totally out of my element.
Yeah, I like that. I mean, I think definitely for me, I like try to look at the booklet much more initially.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Especially if it's like art that I'm not super familiar with, or if it's like
Yeah.
pretty abstract. I'll be like, all right, I like have my baseline. I have my like lexicon of Rider Waite Smith based knowledge on
Yes.
things. Um, and then yeah, definitely just like what did the artist make? It takes a lot. I think it takes much longer. I don't like jump to that intuitive step as quickly.
Yeah.
Where I'm like, what did the illustrator and the author like intend
Yeah.
for this? Yeah, it's I don't know. It's kind of cool to see that like to hear those different processes of like I don't know, like breaking in a
Yeah.
deck.
Yeah,
Um,
totally.
I actually kind of on the note of shuffling and like
Mm.
unlocking the deck, I was looking actually on our last business call. I'm just gonna pull it out because it is the last like deck that I got, and I am gonna do a deck review of it for Pride Month. I know. So this one I just got from my local intimacy shop, which is the best. If you're in Denver, go to Awakening. It is a boutique and they sell just like not just intimacy things, but they also sell gay tarot decks.
Okay, I'm sorry, but my autistic self is like, just to confirm, you mean like a sex shop?
Yes.
Okay, cool.
Yes.
I'm like,
Yes.
I think I understand what you mean.
Yes. Yeah. They saw a lot of wild things there, but this one is called the Rainbow Tarot.
Okay.
Um, I started looking at it. I am gonna do like a full review. I think I just made the decision while we were
Yeah.
talking. I was like, I'm just gonna get to
Well,
know
I think we
her
were on the
before.
phone and you were like, I'm gonna get this deck. And I was like, I supported it.
But actually, so one of the things that I really had to do as well, and this really has to do with kind of like physical print and material,
Mhm.
a lot of these cards are like stuck together.
Yes, I have had that happen too when
Um,
you get a new deck where
yeah,
it's
and I
like
have to,
chunks of cards kind of need to be disconnected from one another.
yeah,
Like when you
and
get a
like,
new puzzle too.
yeah, and a lot of these cards I'm having to very intentionally like pull. There's like a little snap there. You
Yeah,
probably can't
okay,
hear.
okay.
Yeah, like having to kind of snap them apart. And I probably wouldn't have thought about that. Like as soon as I was shuffling, there's probably going to be a bunch of them stuck together. So that's something I'm going to
Yeah.
be like more aware of.
And I think
Um,
that's why like going through and looking at all the cards can be really helpful too, because you can like start to separate them. And even I'm just coming up with this right now, but if you're like going through all the cards, you could shuffle them in that way of like have four piles as you put them down, right? And like
yeah.
randomize which pile you put them in and then push them all back
Yeah.
together.
Mush them up.
Yeah.
um, let's
Okay, so
see.
that's kind of
Yeah.
like getting to know the cards, like shuffling the cards. Let's talk a little bit about like how you incorporate the cards like into your practice. So what I mean by that is how do you decide like how a deck wants to be used or like how you want to use a deck, the role of the deck in a reading, that kind
Yeah.
of side of getting a new deck.
Yeah, and I think we talk about these, and we will continue to as we do our deck reviews. But
Yeah.
like, and we ask each other like, what kind of questions do you ask? Like, do you use this with other people? Yeah, like
Yeah.
there is such an energy to that. Um, I feel really bad. I don't want all of our advice to be like sit with the cards and learn, but like kind of,
If
yeah.
that's your advice, that's your
I mean,
advice.
I mean, a lot of it is just like sitting and trying to intuit like what's your deep feeling, and then like
Mm,
don't second guess that. Like, for example, like this one feels just like very joyful.
mm,
And it feels just very like the art is very like primary colors, very cartoon,
yeah.
very like crayony, but holographic and like very
Yeah.
shiny. It just feels very joyful. So this feels like for me something that and I haven't really gotten to know her yet, but it
Yeah.
feels like this is something that I really want to use with friends. This is something that I
Mhm. Like
really
in
do want to like,
community, yeah.
yeah, like this is something I want to share, and it just feels like very joyful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think for me, I actually have more of a process of like I actually pull a spread. So if I have
Hmm.
a new deck, and this can be dependent. I don't do this for every deck because some decks the intuition's just so present that I get the deck and I know immediately how to incorporate
Hmm.
it. But some decks I get and I'm not really sure exactly like how I want to use them or what their role is in my practice. And so if that's the case, I tend to pull a couple of cards. And so I'll usually um, usually during my morning practice, like when I tend to all my altars and stuff, I will bring the new deck with me and I'll ask what is the kind of main energy or like spirit of this deck? And then what
Hmm.
is the way that this deck would most like to be used in my personal life? What way would this deck most like to be used in working with clients?
Hmm.
And like sometimes I'll ask additional questions, like is there, then any other questions kind of depend on the deck. So if I've pulled a deck that has like certain kinds of oracle language, I might pull a deck you know, I might pull a card like, is there anything else I need to know about this deck? Or is there anything I can do to better work with this deck? Or like
Oh.
questions that might feel appropriate based on the kind of cards that are in there. But those main three of like, who is the spirit of this deck? How does this deck want to be used for my life? And how does this deck want to be used in relationship to my clients?
Hmm.
Are kind of the three main questions I like to ask. And yeah. Like I
I
have
love that
one
you
deck.
ask.
Oh, well, yeah. It's like they'll tell you.
Wait, you were gonna say something, but I did have a question
Yeah.
before. Like, so how do you, and I know that you have your own kind of spiritual witchy practice,
Hmm.
in which you work a lot with ancestors.
Hmm.
What are kind of ways for maybe like other, like, do you have any advice for other people who might not have that same like practice and foundation
Hmm.
to listen and kind of receive those same messages?
I mean, for me, I'm pulling cards, right? And
Hmm.
so what's your question? Like in that reading, how am I hearing those messages or in general?
Yeah, I guess like just in general, like how, I mean, like in connecting to a deck and trying to like
Okay.
get to know it, um, like like are they kind of like thoughts that come up for you? I mean, I'm like mostly
Mm.
curious about you, but like are they, is it like feelings, is it mostly like card based, is it um
For the cards,
yeah,
I think in general, my practice includes a lot of like mediumship and just like hearing messages or receiving intuitive pings and whatnot.
yeah,
But when I'm doing like getting to know a new deck specifically, the way I would frame it is like every spirit you work with has its own language. And so
hmm,
when you're working with spirits, you learn their language. So land spirits speak through nature. And so when you're trying to communicate with your land spirits, you look around, you hear, you feel
hmm,
versus like my a lot of my guides and my ancestors use a more like verbal language where I'll hear things or like get intuitive messages, and then other guides might use like signs, right, where it's like, oh, you keep
hmm,
seeing a word everywhere, like something like that. um so, with that in mind, the language, like with a deck, the language is already built into it, right? And so, if you
okay,
have a new deck, like their language is that deck. And so, when I'm trying to get to know a new deck, I'll pull a card and say, like, who is the main. Okay, so I'm right now I'm shuffling a deck that I just got secondhand through someone. And so I'm shuffling it and I'm saying, okay, who is the main like spirit of this deck? Oh, and the card I pulled is creative writing. So the main like energy of this deck is it's like
what
it
the
likes to be involved
hell,
in writing and like okay, so maybe this is gonna be a deck I use to help like come up with stories that I'm gonna write or like, and so that's how I would start to
wow, that
figure
was,
out like, okay, that's the main energy of the deck.
that's super
How
creepy. Sorry,
how
that's
does
like,
this deck want to be used in my life, and how does this deck want to be used for clients?
so for people who are just listening, Sarah's just like pulling cards out of this like new oracle. What is it? An angel deck, I think you
Yeah,
got?
so we're gonna do
Yeah.
a review for this one as well, but
Hmm.
a coworker of mine at one of the yoga studios had a bunch of decks they were getting rid of, and I took one of them. Um, and it's not a deck I would normally buy personally, but I was like, it's called the Archangel Oracle deck by Doreen Virtue. And I was just like, well, that's such a like old school traditional form of Oracle deck, like the angel decks, that I was like,
Yeah.
ah, I might as well just take this and we could talk about it. And I haven't actually worked with it at all. But so for those three cards, for example, I pulled like, okay, the spirit of the deck is creative writing, Archangel Gabriel. Make time to write down your thoughts in a journal, a pen, or pen an article or book.
Oh, and
Which I am doing.
for those of you who also don't know, but you probably should know, Sarah is a writer.
Yeah, and actually, 5 chapters away from finishing my edits on my novel, so which is very witchy. You guys will love it.
I cannot wait.
And then, how does it want to be used in my life? I pulled spread your wings. Okay. So to me, that would come out, and then the little subheader is Archangel Ariel. Do not hold back right now. The timing is perfect and you are ready to soar. So what that is
Oh,
telling me is that this is a deck that wants to support my writing, and
mm,
specifically in a way of that it wants me to help like grow and take up more space with my writing and like bring my writing to the world.
I like that.
How it wants to be used with clients, I pulled leadership, Archangel Gabriel. It's time for you to assume your leadership power and position and lovingly guide others. So to me, what that comes through as is this is a card, a deck that's not really meant to be used in my one-on-one sessions with clients and
Okay.
is more meant to be used either for like workshops and workshop
Mhm.
settings. But given that the spirit of the card is creative writing, makes me wonder too if it's more of like not necessarily using it in settings like where I'm doing normal traditional card reading, but maybe in ways where I'm
Yeah,
like giving creative prompts to people, or like it
I
also
like
said
that.
to lovingly guide others, right? So it's like, okay, maybe I'm using it to support my writing that
Mhm.
will then be produced to guide others and be more of like a leadership role for others. So that's
Oh,
an example of how I might pull some cards to get to know a new deck.
I love that we got to do that live too,
I know,
because
totally unplanned.
also is Archangel Gabriel on two cards?
I think there's a couple, yeah, a couple of these angels. Like the cards are not named after the angel. The cards are
Oh, I
like
see.
words. Like this one is courage, and it's like spread your wings. It's also Archangel Ariel, but it's a different word and a different quote. And so all the cards have like a word and a quote, and then have an archangel. But yeah, they do repeat.
Oh, that's really cool.
Yeah.
I really like that. I feel like I'm gonna try that with some of the decks that I haven't really like used too much either.
Yeah.
I'm gonna see. I'm gonna like talk to them a little bit.
Yeah,
I think
I'm
that's really
excited
cool.
to now play with this deck. See how I feel about the creative writing piece.
Well, kind of like a little bit separately too. I think like one of the things that I keep on looking at and like keep on thinking about is like one of my decks that I have here. I actually don't use this for readings and I have never used it before and we do plan to review it, but it's my Dungeons and Dragons tarot deck.
Yes.
Which sometimes you can just like I mean obviously I love Dungeons and Dragons. Sarah does too. But this is actually a deck that I've been really thinking about like being a game master or dungeon master where I use like
Mm.
tarot to start building the story. So that's really what I've been like thinking about this with. So there's not like any hard and fast rule about how to use this stuff.
Right, like
There's
it doesn't
no
have to be for divination. Like usually when I pull those cards, I get more like within the realm of divination, how does this deck
yeah,
want to be used? And it might be like, oh, this is good for like career readings, or this is good for emotional readings, or like this is good for
yeah.
people who are new to the world of divination. But sometimes, like my one I just pulled in like your Dungeons and Dragons, it's like, no, this isn't for divination. This has a different purpose.
Yeah, this one definitely like it is in the Writer's Waite Smith format,
Okay, so it
but
is tarot, yeah.
it is tarot, but I definitely want to use this very differently. And
Yeah.
that's why I haven't really used it too much yet too, because that's like this is what I'm saving
Yeah.
for divination in more of like a play space and an imaginative like
Okay,
role playing
so
space.
that brings me to a question with new decks. Do you
Mhm.
feel um that like there are decks that are not meant for Magic?
Ooh. Ooh, not meant for magic. I actually I have a deck that I've been really struggling with getting to know, and I'm
Hmm.
gonna stand up and grab it again.
Okay, cool.
I actually wanted to pull it up for the spring magic episode, but I completely forgot. So hold
Well,
on.
because the reason I asked this is I've only had two decks, so I've been gifted a lot of decks in my life because of my job and my personality.
Hmm.
And I love it. I love every deck I get. And I've received two decks, and now that I think about it, actually, both of them were not gifts. They were damaged at the bookstore, and so I got them for free through our like damages shelf at the bookstore.
Okay.
And it was the Literary Witch Oracle and a horror movies Oracle. And both of them were like the Literary Witch Oracle has like a bunch of like it has like Sylvia Plath and like Octavia Butler and like all these like famous literary figures, and then it has like a photo of them and then like a word, and then it has a bunch of cards that are like tropes of kind of witchy literary themes. Like it has like the house and it has like the frog and it has like, the key. And then the horror movie deck is all like characters and imagery and themes from horror movies. And
That
both
seems
of
not very
them,
you.
yeah, so the horror movies one I gave away to someone. I gave it to a
Okay.
friend. And then the literary, which is one I've kept, but when I opened it, I really felt like this is more kitsch
Uh,
than like actual potency. Like I feel like there's not like this it almost feels like this deck wasn't created by like someone who was like, "Oh, I'm gonna like make a deck for people to use for divination." It was like, "Oh, people like witches and they like reading, so I'm gonna make a witchy reading based Oracle deck so I can make money." And it's really cute and
Yeah.
I like it a lot, but I've really struggled to use it in any sort of
Hmm.
magical like setting. And I found
Hmm.
myself wondering, like, can these cards be magical? Or are they just maybe different for different people? Like I've really struggled to find a use for that deck that resonates with me.
Yeah, and I'm sure like also, and it kind of ties into like what we're going to talk about probably next too, which is being able to give them away
Yeah.
to somebody who might be able to use it in that way, but
Like the horror
also
movie
the
Oracle
horror
didn't
movie one.
speak to
Yeah.
me at all. And I put it up on like a witchy community I'm part of, and some people were so excited about it. I was like, they're gonna have a connection to this, even though for me it doesn't make any sense to use in this context.
Yeah. So the one that I found,
Yes.
sorry if you were watching on YouTube, but there's like a long shot of my crotch trying to find in my in my
Sorry, like they're
box.
lucky. You should
You're
be so
welcome.
lucky.
I have a box above my like whole desk setup that is just full of all of my tarot stuff, and I'm gonna need a bigger boat. This is like a little crazier at this point, but this is one that I actually kickstarted.
Oh,
So
cool.
also, I'm so sorry. My dad and dog just got home, and they are
I heard.
having
Oh, no, now I was gonna say I heard nothing, but now I hear Sora barking. It's
yeah,
okay. It's sweet background noise.
yeah, a little ambiance. Anyway, so this is one that I kickstarted because I saw the art concept for it, and it was just so beautiful. It's called the Botanica deck, by Kevin J.
Oh,
Stanton.
yeah.
Um, so stunning. I've had this for a long time. Gorgeous, gorgeous art, and I like immediately kickstarted it because I was like, "Fuck yeah, this is beautiful." So the packaging is amazing.
It's
It's like,
gorgeous. It's very
yeah,
like
it's like,
sparkly gilded gold. It's like all
mhm.
matte black with gilded gold design on it.
Yeah, and there's like you can't see, but it has like dandelions and
Yeah, very like
wands and cups.
botanical, which makes sense.
Yeah, I love the drawer mechanism, everything about it I really love. But here's the thing is that all of the cards are so beautiful, but
Yeah.
I cannot glean much meaning from it. So all of the cards are different plants and different
But it's also a
flowers.
tarot.
It's also a tarot. So this one is the Seven of
Hmm.
Swords.
I think this is a great example because I have an herbal tarot that I really struggle with that we'll review at some point. And I
Yeah.
think sometimes I feel like this deck is meant for an herbalist. Like, like
Yeah.
the person who designed that card has a reason that they think that flower aligns with the Seven of Swords. But to me, I'm like, that's a pretty flower. Like, I'm just trying to think of what the Rider-Waite Seven of Swords looks like. Like, it doesn't give me its own meaning or its own context.
Yeah, like the Queen of Pentacles, so beautiful. And like they incorporate in their
Is that a
royals.
chrysanthemum?
I think it is. Let me look at so
And to
I
someone who's listening, they heard, oh, Queen of Pentacles, chrysanthemum? That makes sense. And I'm like, that's a pretty flower.
that's mostly how I see it too. So it's actually, yeah, it's the queen is chrysanthemum. And then it says like these flowers represented the royal family in Japan and were
Yeah.
cultivated to promote growth in a singular ostentatious bloom. The symbol is Himiko's necklace with magatama, which is like they incorporate in all the royals some level of like jewelry or coin or like some small treasure.
Yeah.
So these are symbols of Japanese royalty. They're also, fun fact, funeral flowers in Japan.
Oh, wow.
Um, and then it has divinatory magnificence, a stately person of power, generosity and nurturing, reverse,
Hmm.
a suspicious person who shouldn't be trusted completely. So
So it
there's like,
almost makes me think like with all of like with this topic of like can a deck be like not magical? It almost feels like the answer is like it is to someone, but maybe
it
not to
is to
you. Like not
someone.
not every deck is going to align with you, and sometimes you're going to come across decks that either align with you in ways you weren't expecting, like, okay, I really like this deck, but I want to use it for writing or for game mastering and not for
Yeah.
divination. Or I think this art is really pretty and I want to get a tattoo based on it or hang it on my wall, but I'm not going to use it for divination. Or this deck just really doesn't align with me and I need to pass it on to someone who's going to get more use out of it.
I've definitely thought of passing it on to somebody. I've
Yeah.
thought about it, but the artwork is so beautiful that I do want
Yeah.
to hang on to it. It's just not very useful for me in doing,
Mm,
well, like, and I, what I do when I read for friends, and yeah, I
hmm.
don't have clients, but when I read
Yeah.
for friends, I usually say, like, these are all the decks that I have.
Yeah.
Choose one that speaks to you. Like, what do you like? I'm going to be honest, some of them I know really well, and some of them I really don't.
Yeah.
So, choose whatever speaks to you. We'll figure it out together.
Yeah.
And sometimes like people do choose this, and I'm like, like
I wonder if it's a
it's
better
not gonna
deck for
be.
like meditation, like for picking a deck like a card
Yeah,
and leaving it out and using it as like a little, oh yeah, like I'm embodying the Queen of Pentacles and like using it in that purpose.
yeah. And I mean the one obviously the one that I love is the Fool. But and I do have to say all of their major arcana are not numbered; they're symboled.
Cool.
Which is very cool, but it also does make it like very, very difficult to intuit. I do
Yeah.
love the Fool is a dandelion,
Cool.
which makes like a lot of sense because they're kind of blowing in the wind. It's a lot of
Yeah.
possibility. It's a lot of um oh, I found the Empress. The Empress is gorgeous. It is a magnolia.
Oh, I love that. Oh,
But
we're
you can
definitely gonna have to do a deck review because I have a lot of thoughts, but I don't want to spend too much time diving
yeah,
into
I
this
don't want to
deck.
yeah, I don't want to do but yeah, this one is not like as it doesn't speak to me as much, but it does speak
Yeah.
to me in that it's gorgeous. So I kind of struggle with this one a lot because I don't want to let
Yeah.
go of it and I want to use it, but it just
It just
doesn't.
doesn't feel super aligned. And I think that's
Yeah.
part of it is like when we get, because we're talking, at first when we talk about getting a new deck, we're talking about like you buy a new deck, but also you'll get gifted decks or you'll find something cheap
Hmm.
at a thrift store and take it home without really thinking about it. And then
Hmm.
like, or you'll see the art online and you'll want to support it and then you get it and it's just not super
Yeah.
aligned. And so that is, I think, part of getting to know a new deck is
Yeah.
like getting to know if that deck is right for you and like
Yeah.
if it's right for you in what context.
Yeah. And no risk, no reward. Like if you
Yeah.
don't try, you never know. Like
Yeah.
if you're worried about it not being magical, then like who cares? Get it and see it, and then like maybe it'll be a great gift and it'll find its
Yeah.
way
Yeah.
to the person. Just like I don't know, try it out.
Yeah,
Fuck around and
exactly.
find out is my
Fuck around
favorite.
and find out. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I do think,
Um.
okay, so now that we've kind of talked about like, okay, you've got a new deck, you've kind of gotten to know about it. I think something that comes up a lot in Magical World is
Mhm.
like activating the cards or charging the cards. So talking
Yeah.
about magic levels, right? So you get a
Mhm.
new deck. Do you start using it right away? Do you do something first to kind of like I mentioned, touching all the cards to kind of tune it into myself and my own energy? But like,
Mhm.
do you do anything with the deck or does it go straight into your shelf and you just use it when you want to?
Yeah. So it's definitely changed since we started this podcast
Yeah,
because so many of the cards that I get, I'm like, oh, do we want to review that? Do I want to
totally.
like, do I want to open it for the first time? Like there's a deck that I got that I don't really intend on using for um like divination purposes, and that's
Mm,
the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn one.
hmm
That's more of like a historic kind of like
hmm
artifact that I really like. So the ones that I get that I really want to use, I feel like for me, charging it is in that process of getting to know the cards.
hmm
Charging it is that process of me imbuing meaning and
Yeah.
deriving meaning from the cards. And it's this kind of like symbiotic relationship with me imposing my ideas and me gaining
It's like you
ideas.
mentioned, it's like a first date. Like you're kind of getting to know them,
Yeah.
you're aligning your energies. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a relationship building.
Yeah.
How do you charge your cards? How do you
Yeah, it's
activate them?
funny, I know there's a lot on the internet around like using crystals, right? Like put a piece of selenite on your thing or like sit it out on a windowsill with the moon. And I think
Mm-hmm.
that those are really valid. And also, I've just never really done that. I mean, I did a little bit in like my early new age witchy days where I was like, well, the
Mm-hmm.
internet says to put a crystal on it, so I'm gonna put a
Yep.
crystal. But now
Yep.
that I have more of like an intimate relationship with magic, I find that um it's really dependent. I think like you said, like sitting
Mm-hmm.
with the cards, pulling like a spread, like getting to know the cards, touching the cards is really the main thing.
Yeah.
But some decks I'll do different things with. So I got like one deck recently Almost always the decks sit not with my other decks for a while. Like they sit on my desk for a while, and then suddenly I feel like, oh, I want to use this deck or I want to do this with this deck. And so it's like they're kind of like in quarantine when they first come home.
I do the opposite, and I'm like, into the box of tarot cards you go. Get to know your family.
So they like sit downstairs on my desk so that I like see them every day. And
Hmm.
then depending on the deck, like one deck I got recently, I was really surprised because it was sitting on my desk and I felt like I had a client coming and I was like, oh, I need to use this deck. And I was like, that's weird. I haven't done anything to like charge or connect or get this deck activated, but trust the process, trust the intuition. And it was great. And
Hmm.
so, like, some decks I feel like come in like ready to go. And they're like, we're here, we're queer, let's do it. And
Let
then
me tell your fortune
yes,
now.
exactly. Like we have things to say. But then I
Hmm.
got one new deck recently, like the vintage one that I talked about a couple episodes ago,
Yeah.
um, that's actually sitting on my altar because one of my guides like requested it. She's kind of fancy and she was like, I want the fancy pretty deck and like I want like because some decks I get I use exclusively to talk to different guides. And
Love that.
so that deck was like, I didn't expect that, but that's what it wanted. It was to like sit on the altar and it might stay on the altar and it might always be a deck that I use just to communicate with the guides.
Hmm.
Or it might just like spend a month on the altar, kind of getting the right energy. And then they'll be like, okay, you can take this and incorporate it into your client readings now that it's like quote unquote charged.
Yeah.
So that sometimes it sits at an altar. And then a third new deck I got, like, is this Angel and Oracle deck one, which, or the Angels, the Archangel Oracle cards that we just talked about, that's just been
Mhm.
sitting on my desk. And now I feel like, oh, it's going to stay at my desk and it's going to be like part of my writing world.
I love
Um,
that now that I told you.
yeah, exactly. So I think like just getting to know the decks and then like how I charge them is really dependent on the cards, but I think yeah, if you have a new deck and you're not sure what to do, some ways to charge them,
Yep.
um, touching every card, like I talked about, like really getting your energy in there.
Yep.
Moon bathing, so putting them on the windowsill under like a full moon, or if there's like a different energy you want to call in, like the moon in Aries or the moon in Pisces or whatever, you
Yeah.
put it in that.
And by the
Um,
way, I do have a suggestion
yeah.
because I do have on my phone, I have an app here that I keep as a widget to see when the moon phases are.
Ooh, what is that app? I
Um,
need that.
it is called Lunar Phase.
Okay.
And it looks like we're in full moon on the 13th. So tomorrow it looks
Yeah, I
like
was
it's
gonna
a
say
full
we have a
moon.
full moon coming up.
Yeah, you can like scrub through and
Oh,
see, and
cool.
it'll tell you. But I keep it as a widget on my phone. I don't do a lot of moon bathing practices myself. I mostly use this if like my partner's cat, who's my cat too, my stepson, if he's acting batshit, then he'll be like, "Oh, it's a full moon or it's a new moon." And I work in healthcare, and all healthcare people I work with have to be a level of witch because if all the patients are going off, we're like, "It's a full moon,"
Yeah,
and
yeah.
it's real. It's real.
I've heard that with vets as well.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I don't know if I feel like, and I mean this to say, I mean to say this in the most respectful and honoring and like fully bought in way possible, but it's all kind of made up.
Yeah.
Like it's all like make your own thing. If the moon is significant to you, then like that is significant to you. Just because
Yeah.
I don't really use that. I
Yeah, I'm not
use
a big moon witch either. Like I don't use the moon a ton in my magic. I've been told before by like guides and mentors that like I mean I'm a Pisces. Like I probably could really benefit from working the moon with the moon,
yeah.
but like for whatever reason I feel like it's because the moon is how so many of us get introduced to witchcraft. It's like do a full moon ritual. That I feel like I like burnt out on the moon. It was like, I
Yeah.
get it. She's magical.
That you and the moon are on a break.
We
But
are.
I
We've been
mean,
taking a break, but I think like there is a lot of power to working with the energies of the moon. But
yeah.
so I do think that's an option. Same
Yeah.
with crystals. Like I've gone up and down with crystals. Like there are times when crystals have been a huge part of my practice, and times when I've
Yeah.
taken a break, and now there's somewhere in between where like I don't use crystals nearly the level I did in college, but like selenite is a huge part of my practice, and so
I
um,
love.
I
Yeah,
think
selenite
selenite
is a
is a great
really
tool, yeah, for
it's a
cleansing.
super common one that you can get in any like witch or
Mhm.
crystal shop that you walk into. I actually just reorganized my altar today. And I do have like selenite looks like
Oh,
this if you're on YouTube.
it's like a
It's
little white, kind of almost chalky looking.
it looks like chalk.
Yeah.
It's very opaque and it has a lot of like um
Veins.
vertical lines.
Hmm.
It's very organized. And I think that's part of the reason why people like using it is because it does have a very like
Yeah. And
very
it's believed to be one of the
structured.
only crystals that doesn't need charged. Like it is a crystal used for charging, but it doesn't like take in or soak in the energy. It just like clears it out, so you never have to like
Oh,
recharge your selenite. Your selenite can be used to like clear and cleanse and charge other things.
yeah.
So it's really good. You know, you can either just like lay it on top of your deck of cards for a couple days, maybe in the moonlight, or you could like take the deck in your hand and like rub the selenite all over it. You could splay the cards all over the table and roll selenite over it. So
Oh.
yeah, that's a stone that I really like for clearing and cleansing.
I do have one that I did not put on the document.
Oh, how dare you? If
I
it's not
know.
a no, it doesn't count.
So I actually wanted to
Nope,
do
I'm
this
cutting
live.
this part out because you didn't put it on the document. You're not allowed to say anything.
I will go in and type it now. Um, no, I really love this. I forgot to put it on there, but one of the things that I like using is clear quartz because I have
Hmm.
a giant chunk of one that I got gifted by
Ooh,
a
that's
friend.
so cool. That's like the
Yeah.
size of I don't know. It's very phallic, so I'm immediately thinking of
Uh-huh.
something specific, but like,
It's
I don't
not a
know.
shock rub.
It is the size of a very large sex toy. That's what we'll say.
Yeah, it fits very it's a chunky, unwieldy wand,
Yeah.
essentially. I got this from one of my really close friends who's absolutely a witch. Um, and I don't know, there's something about this that like I very much connect with, and
Yeah.
I like leaving this on top of my cards. I do need to clear and like recharge this one. Um, so yeah,
So you're gonna put
sometimes I
the
will. I'm gonna put my big big chunky clear quartz crystal.
yeah.
And I really like that it's like clear up on the top, but it's really like murky down on the bottom. It just feels
Yeah.
like very me. I don't
Oh, I
know.
love that.
The other thing that we can, so it's sitting here, show and tell time. The other thing that you can kind of bathe your cards in that a lot of people use, and it's so common in all kinds of witchy things, is salt.
How would you
Salt.
use salt for cards though?
Like a salt bath is something that's really common. So
Never
you
done
can
that,
like
yeah.
get a little dish of salt. I typically like to do kind of not table salt, but more like coarse
Yeah,
salt,
like
like
Epsom
sea salt,
salts, yeah.
Epsom salt, sea salt, and then putting them on top. It works really
Huh.
similarly for like a clearing, cleansing energy. Like salt
Yeah,
is really
yeah.
commonly used in like a lot of
It's a very
fiction.
like
There's
folk
salt.
magic. It's a very
Yeah,
folk magic tradition, like old school. We'll talk about this at many
yeah.
different episodes because salt comes up again and again in my practice, but I've
I
never
mean,
used it for charging cards. That's cool.
throwing salt behind your shoulder to
Yeah,
clear
yeah.
demons or
Salt at
whatever.
the
Like
windows or the
salt at
doors.
the
Yeah.
doors. That's what I was thinking. Like a salt circle.
Yeah.
Salts for like what am I thinking of? Like when people do like salt drawings, like
Like a
runes and
pen.
sigils.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
And so,
on the
because salt is
floor.
also like connected to the earth, so it's very
Mm-hmm.
grounding, it's very cleansing, it's supposed to like repel
Yeah,
negative energy and like clear
yeah,
the space. So yeah.
yeah. So some people
Uh,
like dunk it fully in salt. Some people just
wow.
do like a little like plate,
Yeah, and
and
like
put it
rested
on
on
top.
top of that. I like
Mm-hmm.
that.
Yeah, which is like much more accessible. Like everybody
Yeah.
has salt in their home, so it doesn't feel as like
You don't need to go buy a selenite wand. Yeah.
yeah, probably not.
I also think, well, and like the moon's very accessible too. Just
The
put it
moon
in
is the
moonlight. Yeah.
freest version. It's the
Um,
most cheap
I also
version.
like to put it on my altar. Like, I think that's a good one. Is just if you have an
Mhm,
altar or sacred space, like just that's
mhm.
already charged and energetically aligned, you can put it there to kind of get it used to your energy.
And then the last thing I do that kind of goes into our next kind of point is like how do you like the next point being like what do you do with inaccurate readings? What do you
Yeah,
do
yeah,
if there's
yeah.
bad energy? What if like
Right. If you've been using a deck and
and
like
it's
you feel
and
like
it's
it's picked up, like, okay, so you've gotten a new deck, you've cleansed your deck, you've activated your deck, you've gotten to know your deck, you and your deck are BFFs,
Yep.
and then all of a sudden you've been using it a lot in certain settings or with certain people where all of a sudden it has an energy that you don't want. What do
Yeah.
you do?
So this is what I do for like cleansing, but also for that, I actually like talk to my decks a little bit.
Yeah.
And I do like a little bit of like a, well, she's sitting there and resting. I'm gonna grab another deck. Um, there's no shortage right now. Forever. This is one that my partner got for me, and I keep it in this case that says "Ask and you shall receive" in
Oh,
gold on the inside flap.
I love that.
I got it for free from Goddess Provisions. We love them.
Oh, incredible.
Yeah. So this one's really wonderful. It's actually the Golden Thread Tarot. It's the one
Oh,
that
we
has an
talked about
app
the app.
associated.
Yeah.
Yeah. And they have an actual deck, which is really cool.
So
Um,
shiny.
yeah, it's like a gold, it's matte black cards with gold foil
Very cool.
for all of the drawings. It's very sweet. So this is what I do sometimes when I'm like, hey, I need a little bit of like love and I need a little bit of help. I would really like that. Thank you. And I give it a little kiss.
Oh.
Or if it's given me a reading, or especially like after I use it with like maybe people I don't know so well and
Hmm.
it's like given a crazy accurate reading, I'll be like, hey, you did a really good job. Thank you so much. Little kiss, little kisses.
Oh, I kiss
And
my
then
deck sometimes too. I just like give it a little, and then when I'm like putting it down, if I'm feeling really like overflowing with emotions towards my cards.
yeah, I'm like, thank you. And yeah, after a reading, and especially if it's a really good one, just like, hey,
Yeah.
thanks for doing that. And I feel like that's kind of like more maintenance.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah. Yeah.
it
Yeah.
helps me kind of like, it's like
It's
a quick
almost like
sweep.
leaving offerings at the altar, right? It's like
Yeah.
thank you for being a part of this experience, for doing the work that you
Hmm.
do, like for giving the knowledge that you give.
Yeah.
I love that.
And that's definitely like sometimes how I address like inaccurate readings. And this is like what
Yeah.
I mean by that is like maybe you've like cleared and activated, and obviously all the things that we've said before apply to
Yeah.
like how to address these problems as well.
Right. You can go
But
go back to like doing a moon bathing or a crystal wand or like, yeah.
yeah, whatever you feel like doing. But sometimes I feel like this is like more common than we care to admit, but sometimes you'll like pull cards and you'll just be like, man, that doesn't really like answer my
Mm.
question, or that's like not really, it doesn't feel like on topic,
Yeah, yeah,
which
yeah.
I'm very used to not
I've
being on
pulled, yeah, I
topic.
mean, I've pulled cards. I mean, sometimes I feel like it's a me problem, right? Where I pull cards
Yes.
and I'm like, the fuck are you
Mm.
talking about? Like,
Uh-huh.
how does, especially when it's like the tarot, which I know really well, and I pull a card and I'm
Mm-hmm.
like, how in the hell does like, the Six of Wands connect to that right now? Like, this is so off topic. And sometimes
Yeah.
it's like I just need to sit with it a little bit and then the interpretation will come through.
Yeah.
And sometimes I'm like, did I mess up?
Was I too quick to judge? But I don't know. There's sometimes where it just like it kind of keeps, sorry to say this, but it keeps shooting blanks.
Yeah, yeah.
Maybe not the best turn of phrase, but like it just
Eh,
kind of like
whatever.
you're like kind of like what the hell is happening? Like these are consistently not really making sense and not really
Yeah,
resonating, and I'm not really feeling them. Maybe I need to meditate on it, but maybe it's just like you see a
yeah.
pattern. I do these things like that we talked about before,
Mhm.
but I also do kind of do a little conversation. I'm like, hey, get your shit together.
A little bit of tough love.
I'm like, hey, you're embarrassing me. You're
You're a
embarrassing
problem
me.
right now.
No, I don't mean that. I'm using an example. Like, we don't need to absorb that energy. Thank you for being
I
an
feel
actor.
like I often feel like yeah, I feel like the way I think of inaccurate readings is like when it's happening frequently and it's not just like
Hmm.
a, oh, I'm not really understanding what you're trying to say here, but it's like, okay, either I'm pulling cards that make no sense over and over again, or like it feels like going back to that topic of like language. It feels like me and
Hmm.
these cards are speaking a different language right now. Like
That absolutely.
then my process is like the first thing, if I'm using it a lot for clients, is to like give it a break. And
Mm-hmm.
and then I also find that like that's a sign to me that like rather than like my interpretations are bad or this deck is bad, it's like we aren't on the
Hmm.
same wavelength. And so
Yeah.
that's where I go back to the like very beginning of like getting to know the deck again, like bringing it to my morning practice and sitting with it in the mornings and like starting to ask those questions again of like, how do you want to be used? How do you communicate? Like, what is your language? So that
Mm-hmm.
I can start to like relearn. It almost feels like, you know, when you go to college and you grow up and then you come home and it's like, why do my parents
Uh,
still treat me like I'm this person? I'm this person now. Like I'm new, I've
yeah,
grown. I feel like that happens with decks sometimes where it's like you work with them
yeah,
so much, they almost like evolve magically, where they're like, oh, we're
yeah.
working on a new level now. Like, let's do
Keep
it.
up.
And then it's like, wait, this isn't what I knew you as. Like, how, and
Yeah.
you have to like, take it's like okay, you took them out to a first date. Now you need to like go get coffee and like reacquaint yourselves. Like you guys have gotten busy with your own lives. You need to get back on the same page.
Yeah. And I really like the idea of like, one, I love the idea of we're talking about it like a relationship because it
Yeah,
is kind of
you do. You
accurate.
are in relationship with your cards for sure.
Yeah. But also like being able to take a break and just be like, hey, like, I think that probably the worst thing that I have done and I've learned not to do is like try to force it. Like, you're gonna
Mm,
give me a reading. That makes sense. Like,
yes,
it will
yes,
just get more and more frustrating and make less and less sense. So I think like, yeah,
yes.
taking a break is probably the best thing to do.
Yeah,
Or it's either taking a break or reorienting yourself, like going back to the beginning and being like, yeah, hey, like let's get to know each other again.
yeah,
I think we're
yeah. And
different
maybe
people
both.
now.
Like I have one deck right now that's on a break. And I don't know. I think I'm in that in between of like, I'm either giving this deck away and I'm done with it,
Mm-hmm.
or we're just not aligned right now. It's like I also have decks that like are seasonal. Like I have
Hmm.
decks that I use a lot more in the summer, and I have decks that I use
Interesting.
a lot more in the winter, and I have decks um that like come and go in my practice. And I think like, and then I have decks that I outgrow or that outgrow me and like I give
Mm-hmm.
away. And so I think like inaccurate readings can be kind of a like sign to check in of like, is this deck still
I
aligned? Do
like
we
that.
just need to reconnect? Do we need to part ways? Does it need a break for a couple months and I'll pull it back out in the summer? Like,
Mm-hmm.
what's going on here? And trusting
Yeah.
your intuition or asking the cards themselves and starting
Yeah.
to learn.
But don't try to force it. I
Try
think
to
that's the
force it.
biggest
That's
thing.
the
Don't.
worst. I've done that too, where you're pulling a card, and it's for me, I've had it less with like the decks and more with the timing, where I'm like
Uh,
pulling cards and I'm like trying to look into a topic, and it's just like not giving me any meaningful answer. And then I'm like, no, tell me, let me use a different deck, let me ask it a different way. And it's just like, no, like either I'm not grounded enough, or this is not the right time to talk about this topic.
mm-hmm.
But it's like sometimes it's just like, okay, I need to give this a rest.
Well, actually, I had an experience today. So, like, I rearranged my little altar
Hmm.
because I was like, well, why not? I think we just need a
Yeah,
little bit of
a spring
cleansing,
cleaning. Yeah.
a little spring cleaning. I'm a little before the spring equinox, but I was like,
Okay, anyone
I'm
who's listening to
feeling
this is it's
pulled.
much later,
It's
so they'll
past.
think you're right on time.
But yeah, I actually used the Modern Nirvana deck, and I was like, I don't
Nice.
really usually put tarot cards on my deck or like oracle cards on my
Yeah.
deck, but I was like, we've been talking about it, and why not? And I pulled this card, and it took a while for me to like get that like which card is it? Again, I like have this little like
Yeah,
finger that kind of
yeah.
like vibrates. And I picked this one. It was like very quiet, and it was the deja vu card, and I was like,
Huh.
wrong again, Tara. Um, I was like, fuck, this doesn't make, this isn't aligned.
Yeah.
And then I sat and I was like, okay, shut up. Let's read the definition. And it was
Uh-huh.
actually like very, it was like, yeah, okay, I see now. And it was very like,
Yeah.
hey, things are shifting, things are changing. You're starting a new job, you're doing a new thing. You're I was like, oh my God, I am starting it. Like, this is all very accurate. Okay, never mind, you can stay.
I think
So,
that's a really good point too of like speaking on that point of like learning the language of a deck is that if you're
yeah,
ever feeling like you're really not getting accurate readings, go back to the booklet. If you've really started to
yeah,
rely on the intuition, because that can be a sign that like, oh, there is a really good message here. I've just lost how to read these cards. Like I'm putting my own bias here and not
yeah,
reading the card for what it's trying to share.
yeah. And I went back to the book
Yeah.
because deja vu didn't really like
Yeah, it
it.
didn't
I kind of
resonate. Yeah.
no, I was like, oh, this is like, oh, you feel like you're going through the same thing, or maybe being
Right,
like in a
right.
cycle. And it was like, no, 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 this is like a renewal of cycle. And I was like,
Hmm.
oh shit, that's like more spookily accurate than I
Yeah.
would have thought.
I do that with the
Um,
tarot sometimes when I pull a tarot card and I'm like, wait, the meaning I usually associate with this tarot card doesn't make sense. And then I'll Google it and be like, oh, I forgot that's one of the ways you can interpret this card. Like, because we get kind of stuck in our own ways. And I
yeah,
would say another really great tool for all of this is a pendulum. So pendulums are really great. We'll do a whole episode about them at some point for yes, no divination.
yeah. I actually just pulled mine out earlier today.
I love my pendulum, and it's a great way to say like, is it time to give this deck away? Does this
Uh,
deck need cleared?
yeah.
Okay, I've done the clearing. Is the energy of this deck cleared or does it need more time? And so you can like
Mm,
put the pendulum over it and ask those questions. And if it turns one, first you got to learn how your pendulum communicates, but if it
mhm.
moves in the yes direction for you, uh then that's your answer, and then you can use that to kind of get that yes no clarity on what you should be doing to kind of work through whatever issues are presenting itself.
Yeah, I love that.
Um,
And then
so
kind of, I
yeah,
think it's a lot of the same stuff that we're going to talk about, but at least so people know that this is just, hey, we feel you and we hear you. Sometimes your cards just get really bad energy, and it can be a
yes.
reading or it can be a person. For me,
So I
because
think what
I
you're talking about is like
oh
if we think of a deck usually being aligned with our own energy, you're speaking of
yeah
like when a deck is picking up the energy from someone else, right? And it's like,
yeah
okay, your deck has picked up an energy that
hmm
gives like bad juju, and all of a sudden like you either have an icky feeling about the deck or the seems like tired or not operating correctly.
or
Yeah.
you have like, well, I've had like two instances. One, I've had like a just a bad like a interpersonal experience
Mm.
around drawing cards. And it was just like not very positive and gave me a lot of like, I don't know, I just kind of like associated it really badly for a
Yeah.
while. So I did have to put her away for a while. And I think I only recently got her out. It was like I kind of put
Because you
her
had a negative
away for,
experience reading
yeah,
that deck for someone with their
yeah,
reaction. Yeah.
yeah. I had to sit, I was just like, oh man, I got this and I loved it. But I had to like put it away for over a year because I was like, every time I look at it, I'm like, I think about that like ooh,
Right, you had
stingy
your own like
feeling.
grief and processing going on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that was the first time I had used it too. So I was
Yeah.
like, oh, this is just so like being able to reclaim it and like use it with a friend or being able to use it in a different context and like
Mm.
really just give it a different like meaning and give it
Yeah.
another chance was really helpful. Or the other experience I've had is reading for somebody and it really just like read something incredibly accurate, did something very faithful, but it was such a painful thing that it brought
Mm.
up for somebody.
Hmm.
I bet you've had that experience before.
I have. I've definitely, I mean, I think that I think that as someone who does this professionally, I think part of my job is the figuring out how to interpret or rather how to translate. So the cards have their own
Hmm
language, but the client is going through a translator for a reason. Like they are coming to
hmm
me and not going to the cards directly. So
Yeah.
my job is to deliver the message of the cards in a way that makes sense.
Yeah.
9 times out of 10, what that means is intuiting and connecting with the language of the cards to simply help interpret because people don't always have that confidence or skill level to do that for themselves. But
hmm
I would say, 1 out of 10 times that is to use different language than the cards are using. So the way I mean that is I will get a message from the cards or from the guides that's very intense,
Yeah.
and I will sometimes feel like my job is to interpret and translate that in a way that's easier to receive.
hmm
And so I haven't had too many experiences where a client like was really, really struggling with what I was sharing, because part of my job is to share it in a way that they can resonate with.
Yeah.
I would say my two exceptions with that are I have had clients who are just going through a really hard thing and there's no way to
Yeah.
talk about it that's not hard. And like we do
Yeah.
cry and it's just part of it.
Hmm.
And then I have had one experience where a client, it almost felt like they just were not hearing what I was saying and were totally
Oh,
reinterpreting everything. Like I was giving a lot of like really positive, like hopeful messages, and they were just fully receiving it as like a bad thing, like a bad omen. And I was like,
interesting.
what are you hearing? Because what I'm saying is very like encouraging, and they were just fully receiving it differently. Like even I saw like a guide when I was meeting with them that was like standing behind their shoulder, and I told them like, "Oh, I see someone's here." And they like freaked out like it was a ghost. And I was like, "No, no, no. They're like supportive." And they're like, "Yeah, but they're lying." And I'm like, "No, they're not. Like I know what I'm doing. I know the difference between a good spirit and a troubled spirit." Like but they just fully were unable
Wow.
and unwilling to receive like the message I was delivering. So I have had stuff like that come up. Um,
Yeah.
but I'd say 90% of the time that doesn't feel like it gets stuck to the cards. Like usually when they leave my space, I clear the energy, whether it be my home, like my reading room or a table at a market. I like ring the bell, I like clear the space, and that's all I need to do. But every once in a while I come home from a market and I'm like, "Oh, we picked up some shit, didn't we?"
It's a little sticky feeling. It's like a little
Yeah.
gummy, sticky, and it's not a bad thing because that's what the divination is supposed to
Yeah.
do. It's supposed to
For me,
like,
it always feels like
yeah,
fog.
yeah.
Like
For me,
rather
it
than
feels like
stickiness,
goo.
more fog. Yeah.
Yeah, for me,
Yeah.
it's like, ooh, it's got some like gross shit on it. What is that? It's like some
Yeah.
ectoplasm on my card. Who did that?
So do you use
Um,
those same clearing methods we talked about when that happens?
so I can think of like one really significant instance because it was with a total stranger, and we'll talk about this in another episode because it was a really like crazy tarot
Oh, I know. I
experience.
know what experience you're talking about.
Yeah.
Ooh, I'm gonna write this down. We should do a whole episode, like a bonus episode that's just sharing our best divination experiences, like
Oh
our
my
best
God.
stories.
Yeah, I have a couple in mind.
Okay.
But the one kind of like reason that I was thinking about bad energy because I had this experience with somebody, and it wasn't because they were a bad person. It was honestly just, or like they brought like a weird energy to it. It was because what they had been asking about touched on something that was so heavy in their lives, and it was
Mm,
so unexpected to them and to me that we were kind of just sitting there like reeling from,
yeah.
oh my God, it was the worst thing anyone could ever
Yeah.
experience. It was a mom who had lost her child
Mm,
due to
yeah.
violence, like they had been murdered.
Yeah.
And the card that came up was the Ten of Swords. And if you don't know what it is, it's a guy laying on the floor with 10 swords in his back.
Yeah.
And she also didn't speak English. So we were using another translator. So it was
Yeah.
like going through
Double
double
translation.
filtration.
Yeah.
But it was so potent that we just kind of sat there like, oh my God. And I panicked because I was a little bit more of a, like a baby.
Yeah, this was early. I think this is one of the first times you read publicly.
Yeah, it was the first time I read publicly and not just like four people. And I was like, oh my God, oh my God,
What do I
y'all
do?
are,
What do I
y'all,
do?
y'all are challenging me. Like I'm not, I'm equipped to deal with like grief, but I think it was just so hard to feel that I was like, oh, I just wasn't prepared for that. And that was just like a big
Mhm.
slap in the face of like, hey, we're gonna show you this thing, and to be there for somebody else, to know that they feel like some sort
Yeah.
of way about this card. There's like a lot of energy being put into
Yeah.
this one card, and every time I see it I think about that woman.
Yeah.
But I definitely had to, after that experience, I definitely had to put my cards away for a little bit. I was like,
Mm.
you rest.
Yeah. Yeah.
That
I
was
mean,
a
I've
heavy
had that happen
thing.
with cards and with guides where like I will feel like, okay, we just did some big work together and they need a
Hmm.
break. Like they
Yeah.
just like we do, like they need a break. And
Yeah.
so I try in those moments to either leave those cards aside for a moment, like let them sit at the altar, or like not call on certain guides who have
Hmm.
asked for a break, like honoring those
Yeah.
boundaries, right?
Yeah. And it's hard, and it's kind of hard because you're having to deal with it too, but you're also having to like Just like any tool that anyone uses, it'll get
Mhm.
rusty, it'll need
Yeah.
some maintenance, it'll need a little bit of rest. If you keep pushing on it, it's not gonna
Yeah.
like do what it needs to do. So yeah,
I
just
do,
giving it a
I
little
think
bit of
that
a
that's important to like honor the boundaries of our cards because like
mhm,
whether it be like they don't want to read right now, like they don't want to be pulled right now, they're not giving you an accurate reading or they've picked up
mhm.
some heavy energy, like if a card is making it clear whether it be through what you're pulling or through your pendulum or through intuition that it needs a break, like
Yeah,
respect that, you know?
yeah, yeah,
Okay,
absolutely.
controversial question, or rather,
Yes.
people have very different opinions on this question. Do you let people touch your cards?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I do too.
Yeah.
Well, I feel like I'm less, I feel like you do more than I do. I feel like I'm the middle of the spectrum.
Yeah, I am very much I actually request that when I read people's tarot cards, I'm like, you shuffle. You tell me your question, tell me something you're thinking about. And even if it's not a question, just like imagine. I'm like, like
Yeah,
hold the cards and imagine that you're kind of like putting whatever energy, however you believe it is, like even if you think this is mumbo jumbo, just fucking humor
just
me.
touch it, just feel it,
Just
be a part of
touch
it.
it
Yeah.
and then shuffle it and then they'll hand it back to me and then I'll spread it out and pick cards.
Okay. Oh, okay. So
Um
you pick the cards, but they shuffle them.
yeah.
Cool. That's
But
how I
because
used to do it. Like when I
yeah.
first started reading tarot. And then on the under end of the spectrum, like my mentor, no one touches their cards. Like they're like absolutely
Really?
no one can touch my cards. These are my cards, my energy.
Wow.
Like it's almost like a spiritual protection thing. They're like very hard boundary. And then
I
I'm in
like that.
between, like when I'm reading for people, I would say yeah, I would say almost always I do it. Like I shuffle the cards, I pull the cards, I interpret the cards. However, I
Yeah.
will let people pick up the cards. Like if they want to get a closer look, or if I'm teaching a
Yeah.
workshop or like a group setting, I'll pass the cards around so people can see.
Oh.
Um, and then every once in a while, I will get an intuitive message when I'm picking up a deck where I hear like let them do it. And so then I'll let
Oh.
them pick. And sometimes it's like full free, like I give them the cards and I'm like shuffle them, take out a card,
Mhm.
you know. And then sometimes the cards they'll have me shuffle and roll them out and let the other person come and like pick a card or two. I always do that if I'm reading with kids. If I have
Oh,
kids who want to read, I always let them pull their own cards. But
yeah.
otherwise, it's just intuition based. If I feel like, oh, this person needs to like connect with the cards more, and for me, I find that usually comes up when I'm struggling to connect with the person. Like their energy and my energy just aren't
Yeah.
fully connecting. It's like, okay, we got to get their energy. We got to get more buy-in. We got to get them pulled into the experience.
Yeah. And I think it is really interesting. You are very much in the middle, like
Yeah, I'm
of
like
that.
smack dab in the middle of the spectrum. Yeah.
I'm like everybody
I'm
touch
also
the
smack dab in the middle of the spectrum.
you are the
Autism
spectrum.
jokes.
We are the spectrum to be
We are the
honest.
spectrum.
Yeah, I think that like my way of and this is like where I think it's so cool to actually talk about these things because Sarah and I like you and I like really I talked about you in the first and or whatever. I don't know what's happening. We talk about magic things a lot.
We do, yeah.
We talk about like and we've read tarot cards together. We've done a lot of these things together. Like frick, we were in like Voodoo Land, New Orleans together, just like bathing in the magic spirits together.
Yeah.
But it's so cool to hear about how your methods are like so different to mine and even though that they are very aligned, like
Yeah.
my way is not as much of an intuition. I really like the way that, I mean, it's intuition plus I like the way that people, when they're thinking about their question, I have them shuffle the cards
Yeah.
so that the cards can kind of like pick up on that frequency.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that when the cards get spread, the cards have that more of that energy of what that question is. And
Yeah.
then when I'm picking them, I can identify much better because I have a relationship with the cards, but they get a little bit
Mm-hmm.
of a piece of
Mm-hmm.
like what that person is asking.
Totally.
Um, which is just so cool to like
I
think about
know.
how different that is.
And I think that that's the key of like, I think that's why I like having these conversations with you is because when people who are listening hear this, it's a reminder that like, there's not one right way. It's not like you
No,
have to clear your cards this way. You have to treat your cards this way. It's like, these are some methods and ways that we have worked with our cards. And
yeah,
then you got to find what works for you. And like,
yeah,
I think that that's an ongoing theme that will come up again and again in this podcast is that when it comes to witchcraft, when it comes to magic, it is a constant balance of honoring lineage, honoring tradition, and
Mm-hmm.
trusting intuition and finding what works for you, even if no one else has said that it's a way to do it, you know?
You rhymed that too, like honoring tradition, trusting intuition. I really like that a lot.
My creative
But it's
writing
true.
deck, it's right here.
I
I've got
know
that, all those good vibes.
she is working. Um, yeah, I think it's really cool. It is cool though, like the way, I don't know, yeah, just try things out, see what feels good. That's the only advice that we can give. It's just like, yeah, see
Yeah.
what works, see what feels
Yeah.
good. Not everything feels good and not everything works.
No.
No.
And what works for me is not going to work for you, and some things will and some things won't. And you just gotta, and like, there's nothing wrong with doing something and it not working. So if you like,
Oh yeah.
charge the cards by putting them in the moon, like, okay, great example, right? I used to charge things by putting them in the moon, and then I just felt like this isn't working. Like, I don't feel any energetic difference from
Yeah.
this. And like, this isn't working for me. So I need to find a new method. Ooh, speaking of
Yeah.
smoke cleansing, that's something I use a lot.
Ooh.
So whether you're using like a smudging bundle, like a bundle of herbs that you're burning, or seining, which is when you take like a fireproof dish and put like charcoal in it and then burn the incense on top of that.
I didn't
Um,
know that had a name.
yeah, it's like a Celtic and Scottish traditional way of
Very
using
cool.
smoke instead of like smudge bundles. They would
Yeah.
like do what's called seining, but those like the smoke of those things of incense in any form can be, or like burned herbs can be another really great cleansing technique.
I like that.
Yeah.
Um, well, speaking of spiritual cleansing, how about physical care? What are some
Yes.
ways
So we've
that
talked
we
a
can,
lot about the spiritual care of our deck, but
yeah, what's some ways that we can keep um physical care of the cards? Because as much as they do a lot of spiritual, metaphysical work, they are just tangible things.
yeah.
And even just looking at my like botanic deck, I can see like the edges are a little bit busted. So like, yeah, what
Dust
are
your decks.
dust your decks, keep your decks clean,
Yeah.
go get
I mean,
tested.
one that we talked about in our Rider-Waite-Smith episode, Tarot Time number 1, was the box you keep it in.
Yep.
Deciding whether or not the box it comes in is sturdy, or if you need to get a separate container or separate box to
Mhm.
better contain and protect the cards.
Yeah. It's also important to consider like what the material and integrity of the cards actually are. So like, um, I mean, like each kind of like card deck of
Hmm.
cards is made of different materials and different, different what is it, coatings and
Yeah.
things. So like this one that I pulled out earlier, the Golden Thread Tarot, are so slidey.
Mm,
Very slidey. It's very like very plasticky. So I
okay.
don't have to worry about these ones as much. I actually just worry about these getting creased and bent because it'll bend like in a plasticky way.
Right, but they can handle like a little bit of if some water is nearby, or like if you take them out in
Yeah.
nature, they're not going to get fucked up by the elements.
Yeah, yeah. Like you can see I'm like
Whoa,
bending.
yeah, you don't even have to worry really about them like ripping or pulling apart.
Wait, do you hear that?
Yeah.
It's making a cool.
Some card
Yes.
ASMR.
Yeah.
I
So
just
it's
tried
just
to
yeah.
do that with my tarot and just bend the cards straight in half.
So prime example, firsthand example of like, yeah, it's important to know what these are like. I actually like keeping this one in a case. Not only does it just match like
Yeah, aesthetically, yeah.
aesthetically, but also because these cards are a little bit flimsier, I worry about them like sliding out and
Yeah,
getting
okay.
um
And then with that in mind, like the way you shuffle your cards can impact their
mhm.
longevity. That doesn't mean not to do it, but like,
Yeah, obviously you got to
um,
shuffle them.
if you split the deck in half and do we gotta look up the official term for it, like the bridge slash, I call it the uh casino shuffling, but like where you split
Yeah.
them in half and kind of let the cards fall one at a time and then turn it into a bridge and let them fall back
Hmm.
together. It's a really great way to mix them up, but it also will slightly bend your cards over time.
Yep.
And so just keeping that in mind. Also, the faster you shuffle, the more likely you are to like accidentally bend or nick a card. Again, that doesn't mean not to do it. I do it. It's fine. But
Yeah.
just like if you have a deck that's more fragile, maybe it's a vintage deck, maybe it's super precious art to you and you don't want to damage the cards. Thinking
Yeah.
through like what box am I keeping in? How am I shuffling them?
Yep.
Where am I keeping them when they're out? So what I mean by that, if they're in the box, they're safe. But like
Hmm.
if you're putting a card on an altar, is it getting sun damaged? Is it
Yeah.
next to water
Smoke
or tea?
damage.
Smoke damage? Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, if it's right next to a candle, like it might not burn, but it might get that like candle, like black smoke on the deck card.
Yeah, that like sootiness.
I think
Um,
this is a very like magical coincidence, but I was just shuffling the cards, and when we started this conversation, I looked over at the deck, and the one that was on top was my card that's the King of Wands, which used to sit at my altar for a long time. And
really, I love
now,
that guy.
because of that, it's like creased in the middle. It's got all these little dots on it that I think are from like sun or water damage. And so like I'm fine with that because this is my personal deck and who cares?
Yeah.
But like if you're using your deck in that way, like putting things out at an altar, keeping things on your person or your purse or like
Yeah.
your car, keep in mind that like these are just some form of paper and plastics, so like
Yeah.
they will get damaged.
Yeah. I mean, they're never going to be pristine. And there's also something to be said for like the personalization of
Oh
that
yeah,
and
it's
how,
like having a
yeah.
well-worn book.
Yeah, totally. I mean, obviously, like what we're saying and suggesting is, obviously not to keep them in mint condition. If you want to do that,
Hmm.
fuck it, whatever. Like, I didn't buy your deck. It's not mine.
Yeah.
I'm not your
If
mom.
you're a collectible kind of person, like collect the shit out
Yeah.
of your decks. I don't care.
Yeah, why not like keep them totally pristine? But I also think there's something kind of like beloved as
Yeah.
well about like I don't know, just like you have that
Yeah.
memory about the King of Wands, like, or you're like, oh, I kept that on the altar, like, or
Yeah.
like, oh, I remember reading for friends and he like made that little nick in that card. So like
Yeah, or he
there's
spilled his
also
coffee on, my
yeah,
page of cups or whatever.
yeah, whatever we're suggesting is just to make them last a little bit longer.
Yeah.
Just because you get them damaged doesn't mean they're less magical. In fact, it can make them even more magical
Yeah.
because you've like imbued a sweet memory
Yeah.
into them, which can also be wonderful. But if you
Yeah.
do want them to just like last a little bit longer,
And I would say
um,
the only like risk, other than just like having the cards slightly damaged, is that it can impact how much you trust your readings.
yeah,
So like I would pull the King of Cups card, blah, blah, blah. I would pull the King of Wands all the time, and I was convinced it was because the card was damaged. And I was like, oh, it has these dots on it, and so it's like when I'm
uh-huh,
shuffling, I'm more likely to cut it there because there's a slight like
uh-huh,
difference in spacing with the cards. But then I got a fresh new tarot deck and kept pulling the King of Wands, and I was like, okay, so this wasn't about the damage.
yeah,
But
it
it
can
can
bias
be,
you.
it can bias you. It can actually like impact how often you pull a card. So that is the one way it might impact the magic level,
Mhm.
but otherwise I think there's nothing wrong with cards that are well loved.
I feel like sometimes it reminds me of like I feel like everybody has that deck of like playing cards that they have in their junk drawer
Yes.
somewhere, and they're like, oh man, I know the ace has like a little like weird notch in it,
Yeah,
so
like I
you can
can
kind of like
cheat with the like poker or
yeah,
whatever. Yeah.
yeah, not like I know how to play poker, but
No, neither do I. I couldn't
um,
even like think of a card game for a minute. I was like, the only thing I use cards for is magic. I was like, poker?
like what if we use our cards to play bridge? Like my grandpa played bridge, and I always just think it's like an old
I
person game to
do think
play.
when maybe for your birthday, what we'll do when we're together is look up the rules for the original tarot game and play the game like as a game.
I would love to. Oh, I have one more note on physical care.
Okay, and then I have a question regarding physical care. So,
Oh, wonderful. So with my regular, not regular, but with my like kind of tried and true Rider Waite Smith deck, because I use it so often and because I pull it out really often, you know what I have to do
huh.
is count the cards. Make
Oh,
sure
that is a
they're
very
all
good point.
there.
I will do that if I was at a market and it was like windy and cards fell and stuff like that. Yeah.
Yeah, make sure they're all there because you just
Yeah.
never know if one slipped away. Also, I constantly forget how many cards. It's 78, right?
78, yes.
Wait, yes. Um, But some cards have like different numbers of cards in them. So I have one that's, I'm not going to give away why there are more than 78
Oh,
because we're going to talk about that
okay, okay. Is its own
when I
little
review
thing.
them. Yeah. But there are like, and especially with Oracle decks too, those numbers change all the
Yeah,
time. So just like, I guess like keep in mind, um, or like
yeah.
check with the deck or whatever you're keeping it in. Maybe like slip in a little like post it or like a little washi tape or a sticker that says how many
If
like
you're
how
not
many there
keeping it
are
in the box it comes
if you're
in.
not keeping it in
Yeah.
the original box. Yeah. And even then, just for shorthand, it might be easy just to make sure
To,
they're all
yeah,
there. Yeah.
yeah. And what do you do with your booklets? Do you keep them in the box?
I do keep them in the box. You do not.
I do not, and that's why I wanted to ask. What I'm learning from us having these conversations is that I really use the booklets like never, and you like really use them. And I think like it's
Yeah.
actually making me think it would probably be a good practice to go back and like use the booklets for a month and just like get to know my decks in that way again.
It's just
Um,
another opinion, you
yeah,
know?
exactly. But I think it could be an interesting perspective. But I really, because the way I read is very intuitive and very channeled, and I'm like calling in spirits and like hearing messages.
Hmm.
I
That's your
don't,
booklet.
that's my booklet. Exactly. I almost find like the booklet has a bias that's not always appropriate. Like sometimes the booklet feels really like, oh, I need to see what's in there. But most times for me, it's like the booklet is irrelevant
Yeah.
because that's not
Yeah.
how I use the cards. However, some people really like I've found that there are certain decks I have where the booklet is super valuable. And so I think but now I pretty much keep all of my booklets on a shelf in my house, just like separate. And then again, intuition. If I'm like going to a market or going to a workshop and I'm bringing a bunch of decks, I never grab the booklets unless I feel intuitively that I need to, unless I get a
Mm,
message that's like, oh, go grab the booklet. And the reason I don't keep the booklet in the box, even though like, because you might be thinking like, well, why do you take them out even if you're not using them? Just keep them at the bottom of the box
yeah.
is purely utilitarian. It's because
I thought it was going to be like, they're absorbing the words.
no, no, it's not magical at all. It's for two reasons. When I read at markets a lot, so I go to outdoor markets a lot. And
uh,
so when I do that, I keep the boxes open with the cards in the box so they don't blow away. And
mm,
the two reasons I don't like to have the booklet is one, when I'm taking the box cards out of the box, it's like I just want to be able to flip them onto my hand and start shuffling. I don't want to have to like make sure the booklet's separate and not
uh,
get like confused. And then also, when the booklet's not in there, there's a little bit more space in the box, so the wind is less likely to catch a card. Or if I need to like put a little
uh,
stone on top of the cards
that
to
is
keep them
purely
from the wind. So it's
utilitarian.
very utilitarian. So that's why I keep my booklets separate, and also because I just don't use them very often. But I think if you're
Mhm.
not using them in that context, I would just keep the booklet because why not? You might want
Yeah.
to.
Another thing that I've also thought about doing too, because some of the booklets are incredibly flimsy. They're like toilet paper, like
Yeah, oh my
single
God, some of
ply.
them are so crap.
Some of them are like Bible pages.
Yeah, yeah.
Like you can see through them.
Yeah, is that called like
Um,
newsprint or something? Yeah, or like
oh, it's worse
newspaper.
than newsprint. It's like motel single ply toilet paper
Yeah,
print.
yeah.
It's horrible. Like you guys just want this to disintegrate and me not to have a
Yeah.
reference. That's cool. So I don't know. I guess I've never done this, but I'm kind of thinking about it now because I have one of my Japanese tarot decks that
Mm.
we got in New Orleans together. Not together, but we were there. We were in the
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
vicinity. Um, that one has like a really tiny booklet that's really like tiny, tiny print. So one of the things that I have thought about doing is like maybe just keeping it in a Google Doc. So I have
Like
all the meaning.
retyping it. Yeah.
Yeah, retyping it out. And then it's kind of like that's how I study anyway, by like typing and writing things out. So it's maybe a way to get to know that.
Yeah.
Also, one of the things that really pisses me off is books that are not meant to carry with the same card.
I don't
Like
understand.
the Wild Unknown Tarot.
Oh, where the booklet doesn't fit
The
in
book
the
is
container.
no, it's just totally a different
Yes.
size.
I think
It's an entirely
I
different
mean,
size and
here's my
situation.
feeling
It
about decks
makes
in
me angry.
general. If they come in a second box, I'm mad.
Hmm.
Right? So you can get card deck. Most most cards come in the box they stay in. And it's like they come in their box and the booklet's in there and that's the whole package. That's what you buy. The only thing you're throwing away is like the tape that's closing it.
Yep.
Every once in a while, you'll find a deck where there's a bigger box that has like the box and the cards and then a booklet and then like that's it and a bunch of cardboard. And I'm just like, I hate it so much. It takes up so much space. It's impractical. The booklet doesn't fit with inside the like
Yep.
box for the card decks. Yeah, no, I hate it when they do that.
I have one that's a perfect example of that. Oh my God, you're gonna be very mad. I love this deck. This
Beautiful.
beautiful box. How do we open it again? Oh,
Magnetic. Love that.
here's the book.
Yeah.
We love the book.
No. The
The
decks,
cards.
so the cards are much, much smaller than the box in a way that's like board game design where they have like that plastic or cardboard insert that the cards sit inside of. Hate that.
Infuriating. It's
Even
infuriating to
just
me.
watching you open it and the cards were immediately like sliding around and falling out. I'm like, that's a hard no for me. And I mean, I'm not gonna not buy a deck for that reason, but I'm gonna be mad
Yeah.
about it.
Yes, I will complain on my podcast
Yes,
about
yes,
love
yes.
the imagery of this. We'll talk about it again, but again, like 2 out of 10 baggability.
2 out of 10.
It's not,
Okay. So we've
yeah,
talked about the spiritual care of a deck. We've talked about the physical care of a deck. Last question.
yes.
When is it time to say goodbye to a deck?
I say never.
Did you
Never.
ever watch that old show on like it was on the same channel that Extreme Home Makeover was. What's that channel called? Like
HGTV.
HGTV. That was all about hoarders.
Oh my God. Stop.
Do we need to get you on that show just for your decks?
It's not a problem yet, but it could imminently be in the future. Don't ask my partner his opinion on these things. Don't ask his opinion. He has a an opinion that's damaging to my little hoarder heart.
I mean, I get it. I'm this way with books, and it's a problem. Like, I have so many books, and like, even ones I don't even like that much. And I'm like, I need to do a cleanse.
Yeah.
But I think with decks, I'm a little bit better about it. I would say, I mean, I say that I've gotten rid of 2 decks in my whole life. Like, I'm not out here just giving away decks left and right.
Yeah.
And the two
I
times I've given away a deck have been when I got one and right away knew it wasn't for me, the horror movie one, where I was just like, this isn't aligned with me, this isn't that interesting to me.
yeah.
And like, oh, actually, now that I think about it, there were 3 times. So that was the first time. The
Okay.
second time we've already talked about the Modern Nirvana Oracle. Remember, I got it through work, and then that one
Oh.
that was less, it was similar to the horror one where I was like, this isn't for me, this is for someone else. But with the horror one, it was like, I'm never going to use this. With the Modern
I see.
Nirvana, it was more like, this is a pretty deck and I would use it, but I know someone who would love it way more and value it. Like, this isn't,
Yeah.
it literally felt like, with the horror deck, it felt like, oh, this isn't for me in the sense that, like, this isn't really my deck. Like, I don't really like it. With the Modern
Yeah.
Nirvana, it felt very literally like this deck is not for me. Like this deck is meant to
Interesting.
be owned by Kaitlyn and it's getting to them through me. Like it felt like I was just like a vessel to pass that deck on.
I love that. I mean, I feel like that's a little bit different though,
It is. It's
like,
a different energy because I still thought it was a great deck, but it really wasn't meant for me. Like it was meant for
yeah.
someone else?
Mm, I think that like the art of gifting tarot cards is
Mhm.
like it's such a beautiful tradition. Again, I think we
Yeah.
talked about this like first episode. Like you do not need to be gifted tarot cards. Just
No.
go buy them for yourself, and who cares?
Yeah.
Support your local witch shop, support your local metaphysical shop, like whatever. Go get yourself a deck that you like.
Yeah.
But I think it is really beautiful, and this is also going to be on another episode of I really adore the magic of gift giving, and I
Yeah.
think that tarot cards can be such a powerful way of doing
Yeah.
that.
And there
Yeah,
is like, there is one deck more recently, and I think it's because I've been reading so much and have so many decks now. I've started to have decks where I'm like, oh, our time together is over. And I
interesting.
just had that happen for the first time with the Wild Unknown deck, where
Ugh.
Wild Unknown deck was like my second ever deck, right? Like I got the Rider-Waite
Same,
Smith and then the Rider. I think you and I bought it together. I think we bought it in Edinburgh because it
same.
was like, oh, this is so beautiful.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, weird.
And it was like our
Yeah, it
second ever
doesn't.
deck. And it was like at the time I loved it. I thought it was so beautiful. Like the art, everything resonated with
It's
me.
all hand drawn
It's
and like rainbows. It's
gorgeous.
so gorgeous.
And
Yeah.
yet I feel like I haven't used it for like 3 years. It just no longer was resonating. It was never up a deck I went to. And it came up a different client. So I have a monthly workshop I do called Tarot and Tea, where we all come together and we drink tea and read tarot. And someone brought the Wild Unknown deck and they were using it, and someone else was like obsessed with it. And I was just like, I think I need to give you my deck. And so the next month, I brought my Wild Unknown deck with me and gave it to them because I was like, you are resonating with the art of this deck so much. You don't have a lot of money. You
Yeah.
can't go buy one for yourself right now.
They're pretty
They're
expensive
an
too.
expensive deck. Yeah, it's like $50 or something.
I mean, it's worth it because like it's all very hand drawn. It's
Yes.
all
It's
hand done.
incredible artistry. Yeah.
Um,
But yeah, so I
but
was
I
like this,
yeah,
and so I'm starting to have, there's two decks that I own that like I feel like could go either way right now, where I'm like waiting to see if they come back around, but I'm also like, it might be time to pass these on to someone else.
yeah,
So I think the time to say a goodbye is just dependent. Like if it feels like it's not
yeah,
aligned with you, or it feels like you're never using it and there's someone who would use it more. Or you say, hey, I love all my decks and I paid money for these and I'm never gonna get rid of a single one of them.
yeah. I definitely see a lot of my decks, even ones that I really don't use. Like the first Oracle deck I got for myself was the Amenti Oracle, and it
Mm,
just never really read super well for me. And the Wild Unknown as well. Like the animal guides, like really
yeah.
don't super resonate with me that much. And sometimes like the meanings, it just doesn't like really translate.
Yeah.
But I sometimes because I love doing artwork and because I love having like a little archive of ways that tarot has inspired me, there's a reason why I bought all these decks in the first place. There's
Yeah.
a reason why I did. And even if I don't read them anymore, to be able to have them as like a visual archive and like
Yeah.
a little library, I have room on my shelf. If I didn't, I would make room on my shelf.
Yeah.
So it's nice to just have to at least like go back and reference and like look at the
Totally.
art and see. But I guess like my one piece of advice, and I'm sure you will agree, is that like don't part ways until you're very sure.
Hmm.
Don't part ways
My
until
God, I've
you're like
done that with clothing before,
certain.
where you like get rid of
Uh,
something and then like the season comes back around and you're like, where's that sweater I used to wear? And you're like, fuck, I got rid of it, didn't I?
or you see an old photo of yourself wearing it and you're like, I'm so cute in this. Like, why did I give that away?
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
don't because you do not want to take back a tarot deck that you said goodbye to.
I mean, if you've given a deck
How
away,
awkward.
like you'd have to rebuy it. Yeah.
How awkward. You do not
Yeah.
ask for it back.
You'd have to go buy it,
Um,
and that's money, and money's scarce in this world.
and also it's just not the same relationship too.
Yeah,
I don't
yeah,
know.
yeah.
I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. I think maybe I'll think about giving. I've bought decks for people, like
Yeah. I
absolutely.
mean,
I
I
mean, I
don't think
bought
you
decks for
have
you.
to. Like, I think it's person by person. You find what works for you. And I mean, now that we're doing this podcast, like, it's like I've got to review them all. I'm not getting rid of any of them until we've reviewed
Yeah,
them. But I
yeah,
think, like, uh, yeah, I think it's just like a personal choice of like, does this deck
mhm,
still align with me? Do I want to hold on to it for like personal reasons? Or is it just like taking up space and I'd rather or someone else would get more use out of this than I would?
yeah.
Yeah.
And then maybe, I mean, we talked about this in our last meeting too, but maybe down the line too, we can start to give away decks to some of our
Oh, I
listeners.
love that. I
And
did
I just hit
see
my mic. Whoops.
someone I follow, Juliet Diaz, who's like a fantastic like witch and spiritual teacher and fantastic person to follow on the internet. Every once in a while they've sold old decks off on their website. They'll do like a deck and book purge where you can go on their website and buy for like $5 their used like decks and cards. And I thought that was
I love
clever.
that.
Yeah.
I really like that.
Yeah.
That's very cool. I mean, yeah, it depends on how you like to use it, depends on how you want to do it. There's
Yeah.
no rules, only rights. Um,
Well, I think, is there anything else about like deck care that feels relevant, or should we wrap it up?
Not really. I was gonna say, do you want to wrap it up? Because I'm very strongly feeling this deck.
You want to pull a card for
Um,
us?
yeah, it's gonna be my
I
first card
would love
pull.
that.
It's my first card pull from this rainbow deck.
Ah, so the rainbow tarot that we were talking about earlier with all the colors that you wanted to read in community. and
Yeah.
enjoy.
Yeah, this feels like very it feels very aligned. It keeps on just like not wanting to be put down. It keeps on like
Yeah.
not wanting to be pulled away. And while we were sitting, I was sitting here talking, I was like making sure all the like cards were getting separated. So just really quick, this is the Rainbow Tarot, art and concept by So Lazo. And then the guidebook is by, I'm so sorry if I pronounce this wrong, Cyre. It's Cyre with accent E. I think it's
It's a
Kyrie or
beautiful.
Cyre.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm gonna say Cyre for now. Cyre Jarrell Johnson. It's very sweet. The back of the deck is like just
Like a rainbow explosion of joy.
yeah,
And it's got
yeah,
all the suits represented.
and it's all holographic.
Ooh, holographic edges. Oh, I can't wait to do our deck review on this one.
I know. I'm full. I'm so excited. So I guess yeah, let's do
We ask
one
like,
one for me, one for you.
well, I think
What should we do?
that's what we do for our deck reviews. But I feel like for our main episodes, we usually do something thematic. So maybe since it's like a deck care episode, we could do like, what should people come in? Oh, okay. What's one thing people should keep in mind when building relationships with their tarot and oracle decks?
Okay. Oh, that one almost like popped out. Okay, I think we're good.
Okay.
Let me move my mic and spread out my cards. Come here, you daddy slut. Spread yourself. Sorry.
It's okay. I feel like this is a great example how every tarot deck has its own language. There are some decks that I feel like I have to be very polite to and have very like proper
No,
conversation with, and there's some decks that I'm super sassy with.
this one's like just very joyful and funny and hilarious, I
And,
think.
and
I
gay.
also got it from a sex shop, so like
Yeah,
come on.
exactly, exactly.
I'm so sorry. By the way, I'm so sorry, Brenda. I'm so sorry, Renee. I know you're
Hey,
listening. I'm
hey, we
silly.
said in the first episode that we were gonna cuss. If they didn't want to hear it, they don't have to listen.
I know, but I just said something worse than cussing. It's fine. We're all here. All right. I feel like it's you. All right. What is it? Queen of Swords. That is so
Mm,
appropriate. Okay, but
I
let me show you the
love
artwork.
that. Okay, so the art, it's like kind of a cartoony character with like those red circles instead of blush. They have like medium tone brown skin. They're wearing like a butterfly headpiece and they've got butterflies all over their dress. Their shawl has clouds and the sky on it. And they're in the position of the Queen of Swords. So they're sitting on a throne, gazing outward with the sword in their hand.
Hmm.
And it's all like red and blue.
It's so pretty. I
It's
love
very
these cards
pretty.
so far. It's just, it feels just very silly and like not taking itself
Yeah.
too seriously. It makes me very happy. All right. So, do you want to describe Queen of Swords really quick? And then I'm going to read from the book
Okay, yeah.
because,
So, in the context of our question, like, what should we keep in mind when building relationships with our tarot and oracle decks is the Queen of Swords. And so, I think to me, the two messages that are coming through are like, that using tarot and oracle decks is a way to hone in on truth and a way to get closer to what is true and to see with clarity the meaning behind things that might typically be obscured. So when you're building relationship with your tarot, we've been talking a lot today more from like a cups perspective or a pentacles perspective of like
mhm,
care and nurturing and foundational like practices, but to remember that ultimately the goal when building relationship with your tarot, with your oracle decks, is to build a language of communication in which you can speak more clearly what is true and find easier access to the truth.
so the reason why I was just giggling while you
Yeah,
were
yeah.
saying that is because I pulled up the book. By the way, booklet, amazing. Really love
Beautiful.
it. We're going to review this later. Queen of Swords. Are you done playing mind games with other people? Do you have the courage to be your whole self?
Oh, yes.
And I read that as you were saying that, and I was like, oh, damn. Yeah, she's a
Ah,
little bit of like, yeah, she's in total control of herself. They
yeah.
aren't cowed by life's struggles.
I think
Um,
you said, do you have like the courage to be your true self or your whole
your
self?
whole self,
And
yeah.
I think that that's an important part of building relationship with your decks too, is we've been talking a lot about learning the energy of the deck, but don't forget that you also are bringing your energy into the
Yeah.
relationship, right? That it is a relationship, and how do you let your energy be just as present as the deck's energy?
That's actually like a perfect piece of advice. Like, yeah, how do you show up authentically in this whole situation? Don't pretend to be anyone else.
Yeah.
Just because a moon bath works for somebody, I think that's been the thread of this whole thing. Just because the
Yeah.
moon bath works for someone else doesn't mean it's right. Just like do whatever feels
Or just
authentic
because
to
it
you.
doesn't work for me and Kaitlyn, if you're listening to this and you're like, yeah,
Mhm.
moon bath, then do it. Like, do what
Do
feels
it.
right. Like, bring your own energy to your relationship with the decks, and that's how the two of you can form something like truly
Yeah.
unique and personalized.
So I'm gonna do my little like, hey, I know we just met, but that was fucking cool. Thank you. Just
Well,
give my
on
cards a
that
little kiss.
note, thanks for sitting with us for another week, for listening to us ramble about tarot
Yeah.
and Avatar and whatever else came up.
This is a long episode. This is like not, I didn't, I mean, I
I
knew
know,
this,
I thought like,
we had
oh,
a
this will be
lot of
such a short, like quickie, and then we just like
same.
talked for 2 hours straight. But you know,
Yeah. So thanks for being with us here. We love to do this.
yeah,
And we'd also love to hear your thoughts.
yes,
If you want to go to sarahdittmore.com and go to our
yes,
podcast link, you'll see it at the top on the menu. You can go and tell us your thoughts, ideas about future episodes if you want to be a
yeah.
guest. If you think that we were totally wrong or totally right, or
Yeah, there's a
or you
little
have your
form
own
on the
way.
website where you can give any thoughts, feedback, ideas. Yeah, if you go to sarahdittmore.com/podcast, it'll also
Oh,
be in the show notes.
fabulous. Yeah.
Yeah.
So come join us next week where we're talking about what is a witch,
No,
right?
because we're recording out of order. So they've already
Shoot.
heard the What is a Witch
No.
episode.
Okay.
Next
Thank you
week,
for listening to What is a Witch?
next week we're talking about dun 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 practical magic.
I'm
Ooh,
excited
that's
for that
actually like
one.
thematically like deck care and it's kind of like the same idea of like how do you incorporate magic in a very practical everyday part of your life. So,
So we've
uh
already prepped ourselves for this next episode. Yeah.
yes, yes. All right, well, we'll see you next Wednesday, and in the meantime, as is above,
So is below.
as is within.
So is without.
Thank you
I love you.
and blessed
Blessed
be.
be. Bye.
Bye.